Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, November 10th meeting of the Finance Committee. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, a roll call of attendance will be taken. Mr. Alfred.
Here.
Mr. Whitaker.
Present.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
And Ms. Nersessian.
Here.
And I am, of course, present, so we will consider ourselves convened. Before we begin with the meat of tonight, which is to get through our recommendations, hopefully for the warrant for the December 5th town meeting, I will say that we have no urgent administrative matters like minutes and things, so I'm going to defer that to a later meeting so we can get down to our business. So we'll start out, I guess, with, I want to try to keep this moving along. So Travis, I'll let you give any information you want. I suggest that what we start with is we just start with the warrant and we just take it article by article and let the questions come as they, as we have, unless you want to say something to start it all off, but I don't know if you need to or not. So.
Nope, however you want to handle it.
Okay. So let's, everybody should pull up their copy of the warrant that was sent out by Travis. Let's see, let me go find it here. We sent it out this morning, right? I think the latest version. There it is.
10 o'clock then?
Yeah.
Maybe noon.
Okay.
I don't know. It was a long day.
So if you look at the one that's called STM 12520 FinCom Review V3, that's the warrant as we see it now. So let's just start going through that. We'll talk about Article 1. Okay, now I want to just give a quick background here to remind everybody, both at home and the FinCom, since we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The DOR is requiring us, as part of our setting of the tax rate, to assume that the cherry sheet numbers that were provided by the governor are approved in this final state budget, because obviously we're not going to have a state budget by the time we make our recommendations tonight. When you do that, as we know, that differed from our assumptions. And so over the last couple of weeks, Travis and I have been working on a way to reconcile the DOR requirements with where we as a committee want it to be, namely that we want to be prepared for potential cuts later on, that we want to keep the operating budget relatively tight, and so forth. This Article 1, if you look at what Travis sent, and that's, I think, in, which handout was that? That was the one that says Article 1 to 4. I think that's got it in there, right?
Yep.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, yes, you see on the second page there, right, of the one titled Article 1, Articles 1 to 4, Tax Reserve, Free Cash Impacts. You'll see a list, okay, this, and obviously, as a committee, we're all familiar with this because we saw this last year until it got withdrawn. One of the things that Travis and I discussed and that we have to discuss as a committee is prior to the pandemic, we had prepared budgets assuming a 1% COLA for the non-union personnel with no adjustments for the department heads because they were going to be getting their first full year at their new salaries. So in discussing our reconciliation, the reconciliation with Travis, we decided that that's one thing we should restore if we're going to have to assume that this revenue is there. And that's what this Article 1 is the restoration of all this. And you see there are a couple of exceptions to this in the list. One is the reserve fund, where we've spent about 50 grand so far in the reserve fund. So we took 40,000 and put back 40,000 into the reserve fund. As far as the 400 that we took from stabilization, we'll get to that in a minute because that's a future article. We're putting the money back. So we're going to put, the Article 1 is to put 40,000 in reserve fund. There's under the treasurer collector, there's a larger amount. That's kind of the, I guess I don't have to go through these. He's listed them as the FY21 other. and you see the description of each of those. So I guess I'll just throw the floor open for questions now. If anybody has questions about any of those other things, as you see, the 1% is pretty obvious what that is. So does anybody have questions about those items?
My only question is regarding the 250 for the unemployment. What's the story of us doing all the different appeals and everything? Is it pretty much falling in deaf ears?
So I wouldn't say deaf. Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, go ahead, Travis.
So I wouldn't say deaf ears. Mary's been talking directly to the DUA, which is good. It's progress. The question really is going to be, the way that I'm looking at this one is we approach it as if worst case scenario, they don't fix it by the end of the fiscal year. This puts us in good shape. And if they do fix it by the end of the fiscal year, this flows to free cash in a way that would have most likely happened if the DLS had not sort of gone through this exercise, made us go through this exercise. So I think it protects us in the second half of the year. And it also, if they do get their act together, the end result is sort of what the original intention was if DLS hadn't given us this directive. But at this point, I can't tell you that they will get their act together, but we are in direct communication now, which is an improvement.
That's good. The other question I have that's material is the 50,000 for purchase services under public buildings. What does that entail?
So this one is my idea. I think we've all sort of discussed this a little bit in terms of looking towards FY22. If I break out the public buildings budget, which includes things like munis, leases for copiers, energy for buildings, if you actually break it all apart, there's about $55,000-ish specific to building maintenance. I think as we approach 22, as we begin to put together the idea that the facilities manager would have a budget that would move that out of public buildings where munis and all these other things are, $50,000-ish is really not going to get him where we want to go. I think in this year there's quite a few projects where we're having to pump the brakes on any spending of things that he's identifying, that this gives us the ability to do some things in this fiscal year and then have a conversation as we approach 22 on how we would like the public buildings facility manager transition to go.
Okay.
So it doesn't commit us to anything in 22, obviously. My intention in the 22 request would be to sort of, decide how we all want to handle facilities manager's budget. But I think this gets us through some projects right now. And I think if everybody's in agreement and it's the right structure, then we can talk about it for 22 as well.
Makes sense.
Anything else? Okay, anybody else? Go ahead, Dan.
So the legal expenses, do we know those? Have we been told what those are? Or am I just forgetting?
So this one is, again, I would kind of classify it similarly to unemployment. I am looking at the two biggest sort of liabilities as we approach the second half of the year and saying, obviously the finance committee reserve, which as the chair mentioned, we're sort of putting back in place at the 600,000 level that we started at. If there were going to be anything that was going to be a real budget buster, the two would be unemployment and legal that I'm looking at. Legal being a couple things. One, obviously we've had the approach for union negotiations where we're going to essentially sit down twice within a year. That's not really a budget buster, but I'd like to factor that in here. The other one is really litigation. So the way that our agreement works is that we have a flat fee for everything but litigation. We have a couple hot ticket items for this year on the Hoppingbrook side, but also elsewhere in town that I'd like to prepare for. If we don't need to use it, same instance that I discussed with the unemployment line, that's great. And it goes essentially, the intention is if DLS had not given us this directive, we have a little bit of control over it. But it also protects us in the second half of the year because we have some potential costs when it comes to litigation.
I think for 22 you're expecting 80, and so why is that?
So the other thing that I'd like to I just want these things to, I don't want anybody to say you told us there wasn't going to be any cost in 22. So I want to highlight any potential. Right. My idea for 22 would be to look at, as we approach the legal budget, whether it makes sense to factor in litigation into our flat fee for legal. I haven't made that decision, but I think it's one that it would increase our annual cost, but it would also give us some stability. but it's one that I think we should discuss as we approach 22.
So of the 535 other, what do you think is going to be recurring that we're really sort of adding to 2022?
So
I mean, obviously half of it is unemployment, so that's gone.
Yeah, so
You see it's on the sheet. There are certain things where he tried to note. I had warned Travis about this and said, try to break out what's going to keep going beyond 21.
yeah, so I would say, definitely the reserve fund. Obviously, I don't think we're going to necessarily be in the 600,000 range. So the 40,000 sort of one time. I did highlight that the treasurer collector HR reorg is a conversation that will lead into 22. Some of these part-time hours are really identifying the fact that we don't know if a second round of CARES is coming through. So let's plan ahead in a couple of these departments. The fire department, fire dispatch OT, that is a this year issue. I don't think there'll be any 22 impact. The Youth and Advisory Council $10,000 request, that was, could have been set up as a separate article. I think it's easier to do it through here, and it will have no 22 impact. That's for them to set up some grant requests. And if this unemployment insurance thing bleeds into 22, I'll throw my hands in the air on that one.
Okay, great. So I'm good. I just want to thank you for putting together something that's actually sort of coherent and understandable to sort of see what's going on with all the moving pieces. So brilliant change.
And I just have a question. Are we going to have this in the warrant or somewhere so we can explain, or some high level showing what the 564,800 is?
So I would say if we sort of just do the total column, I just wanted you to see the impact of the 1%. So you sort of understood the context of it. I would say it's the total column, because this is essentially what will be voted. This allows Sharon Emmerich to put this into each line item and give you a revised budget after the fact. So this would be available to sort of understand what goes into the 560.
Okay.
564.
Okay, Sue, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, Travis, first, thank you for this. It's really helpful. If there are other funding mechanisms for the grant writer for Youth and Family Services, I went back to Jackie after doing some research. So if that comes to fruition, what happens to that 10,000?
So again, on any of these that come in and then don't need to be spent, whether it be unemployment or any of them, budgeted and unexpended costs flow to free cash at the end of the year, and is going to help us as we approach 22. I think if we knew of something that was coming off before town meeting, we could certainly make an adjustment, and then that would go to unused levy capacity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's. I was going to. When you said that, I was thinking I should have pointed that out. Right, everything that's unexpended from this goes to free cash. So, okay. Any other questions on this one? Okay, if everybody's fine with that amount and the items, then and there was one other thing. Hold on, there was one other thing. I saw something I was going to mention something about. Oh, I know what it was. So Travis, just to be clear, and this is mostly for the rest of the committee, because you and I had discussed this, for the Board of Health line, for the part-time hours post-CARES, when Travis and I were discussing what to do there, I made it clear to him that from my perspective, we hadn't formally taken a position, but this is why I want to bring it up. The presumption is that those additional hours do not cause a non-benefited position to become benefited.
Right. So the conversation that I've had with the Board of Health is, so last night through the CARES Act, they got some hours that they need. I think we need to factor in the idea that if there's no CARES beyond 12/31, that they're going to need, this isn't going away, and they're going to need some support. I think we've talked about a number of solutions to sort of getting them hours and getting the workflow done. At this point, the intention is to get everything done throughout this year. And if there's going to be any change in the structure of that office, which is a department head, a part-time staff above 20 hours and a part-time staff below 20 hours, that would be an FY22 conversation. And, we do need to get through this year, and we can certainly make that work.
Okay, so question though, the source of the money matters not when determining eligibility for benefits?
No, but it does. It matters if the work is essentially part of the job description on a consistent basis, or if it's I'm trying to think of the word. If it's not a consistent process.
Like
that Keith was
customary or
saying
something
for.
like that.
Yeah.
Don't they say
But there's a formula too. They don't leave it up to you to decide whether it's customary or not. At some point it kicks in, right? If you've worked a certain amount of
if you work, if you work over 20 hours for some length of time, and that was the discussion I had with Travis. Was I was saying, okay,
Here's your, Travis, you're on top of this, and you're making sure that we're following all the rules. Okay, that's all I care about.
Yeah.
Okay. And if they trigger benefits, I mean, I want to make sure, there's a long history with the health department of trying to basically do something with this position, and it's, I just want to make sure that they don't just do it around and do it themselves. So
To that point, I personally have no problem having that conversation. It's just that conversation is an FY22 conversation at this
I
point.
want to make sure the conversation is had before they implement the action.
Absolutely.
Travis and I have talked about this.
Okay.
yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, just to make sure that it was clear that our intent, as again, you guys can disagree, but I said based on conversations we've had as a committee prior that the intent was that does not trigger benefits.
Right. And my intent is not to manage it, it's just to make sure that we're
Yes,
notified
I
of
just wanted to make
ahead of time.
Yes, I just want to make sure that we had communicated our intention to Travis, and it's been communicated, so we're good. I think that was it. I don't see anything else that I was going to bring up about these. So, okay, so if everybody's fine with that, and if we go back to our warrant, we can say, I will entertain a motion that we recommend favorable action on Article 1.
I make a motion?
So moved. A second.
Okay, that requires a roll call vote, of course. So, Mr. Alfred,
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian.
Aye.
And just as an FYI for the committee, as long as nobody turns their screens on or off, I'm going to be doing the votes in the same order, so you always know when your turn's coming up. So, because I just go across the way it shows up on my screen. So, and I vote yes. So we have a favorable recommendation for Article 1. Okay. Now I'll go back to the warrant. Okay. The Article 2 was inserted as a result of Article 1 because of the 1%. We had to go back. We had withdrawn this in July. So this is just the wage table. And you see that Travis has highlighted in blue 2 things there. And I'll just point out that I'll let him talk about those 2. But other than those 2 items, this reflects the 1%. So
Exactly. So one of them obviously was the position that was created through the CARES Act to give Chris some help with these Zoom calls. That's working well. I would like to sort of factor that into the future, but again, not a conversation that needs to preempt the FY22 conversation. But we want to reflect the fact that we sort of fit him into this schedule, but now we have the opportunity to put him in. And then the other one being the idea that we will be trying to reconstitute one of the positions within the treasurer collector's office to make it more HR specific and target a candidate pool that has HR specific certifications. So we think that the right way to do that is to sort of rebrand the position, not change headcount or anything like that. This is moving towards a conversation that we want to have about sort of creating a separation between what the treasurer collector function is, what the HR function is. I think it's the right path to travel when it comes to the liabilities that the town faces through personnel and those types of things. I think this is just one step, and we'll have a further conversation FY22. And so that's just reflecting this. We also have a job description that Mary and I have worked on that we think is going to work.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand. I'm sorry. So I know the schools keep asking about an HR position. Would that position also help with the schools?
So at this point, I have spoke with Keith Bidet and the interim superintendent, Dr. Kuska, on this in general. I wouldn't say that the request that they had originally, this sort of takes the place of, but at this moment, especially through all of the hiring and sort of everything going on, it's put a lot of burden on Mary's office. We had this vacancy and we did not fill it right away because we knew, it's been sort of a turnstile in that seat, and we really wanted to think about it before we put it back on the street, which has been hard to deal with, obviously having a vacancy through all this. So I would say that it will certainly impact and improve HR services that the school receives. I don't know that it sort of negates what they had talked about previously in terms of having more of an HR role over there as well. I think we need to work on a holistic, as we approach FY22, HR approach with schools and town. I think this is a step in the right direction, essentially, before we put the position back out and fill it with somebody who, again, is just going to cycle through and not get us anywhere.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, so just quickly,
Go ahead, Dan.
are all the numbers here changing? I'm wondering if it doesn't seem like all the numbers here are changing. And if they're not, why? I'm not looking to cause trouble, but we don't have the managerial salary table on here. As part of
It's staying the same, right? Because it's staying the same. These are
but
the only ones that are changing.
But aren't the max rates for like the camp counselors and all that kind of stuff changing, staying the same too?
Let me double check that I didn't miss anything. Right. So
I don't know if you have to vote, but have the whole entire thing in there. And really, I'm not looking to have any
So it was voted in July, so I don't think we do, but I'll double check that with council. But
Okay.
there's no change to the department head structure at all.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
But there's no change to some of this other stuff too. I thought.
Correct. And in fact, if you look at the wording of the article, right, it says to reflect the revisions, deletions, or additions as set forth below. So by implication, nothing that's listed, if it's not listed below, it's not changed.
Okay, that's fine.
So.
I mean, it doesn't do anything anyway, right? I mean, it's not like it handcuffs anybody.
So do we want to table this until Travis looks it, or can we make a motion?
I think we make a motion, vote on it, and then if council says we need it, then we can open it
We can
back up.
consider next week, yeah.
I make a motion
Do we
to,
recommend favorable action on Article 2?
yes, I make a motion.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none, let's proceed to vote. Mr. Alfred?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, the motion carries. The one thing I did think about, not that this is relevant to our vote, we already took on Article 1, but the one thing I remembered what I was trying to remember about Article 1. Travis, this is something I forgot to mention to you, but with the CARES, can you double check that we're not going to jeopardize any extension of CARES by pre-budgeting some of these CARES activities? Okay, that was my only concern, was remember CARES round 1 was if you already budgeted for it, you can't CARES it. One would presume that we wouldn't be penalized this time because the argument last time was it was something you didn't know about pre-pandemic. So it was clearly something you were planning on covering. Now the fact that we're in a pandemic and we're covering it shouldn't be an issue, but can you double check that we're not going to screw ourselves by putting the money aside now? Because if they just extend CARES and say we're going to throw more money at CARES and then we're subject to that same restriction, we actually would want to take out the CARES pieces,
So
as stupid as that is.
I can absolutely check on that. The only thing I would say is the one thing that DLS has sort of indicated, and again, I keep telling them it's nice when they indicate things, it's better when they announce things publicly, is that, if there were to be a freeing up essentially of the money that is still there through the 1.3 million, the way that people have approached them and what people would like to see is essentially that it become unencumbered and be allowed to sort of fill revenue shortfalls. But you're right, if they just sort of say, just spend it all, I'll make sure that we're in good standing.
Yeah, I just want to, as I said, my only concern is that in the rush to get something through, they might just say, okay, we're going to throw more money at it and just extend the CARES deadline from December 31st to, December 31st to 2021, and then you're subject to the same rules, and then it becomes a little screwy. So that's just, and that might be something, I don't know if Carolyn or Karen might want to weigh in on in terms of when they're discussing how to put this together next time that they address that. So, okay, so we can move on to Article 3, the Stabilization Fund. As you see, the recommendation here is that we take 400 from free cash, that basically restores what we took out in July, and then add the 484 from the overlay to that. So, and again, if you just as an FYI, if you want to see the detailed accounting, that was the third attachment where you see the summary that Travis produced that we looked at for Article 1. The first page of that talks about how the total various monies, the the capacity, the state, the capacity, the overlay, the free cash, how it gets allocated there. So if you want to see how why we came up with the numbers that are there, that's how.
So the 400,000, just, I think you said free cash is raise and appropriate.
Okay, so because I was gonna say the draft you sent us says free cash.
In the language?
Yes.
Okay, that's an error on my part. I'll fix
Okay.
that.
So you want to raise and appropriate? Okay, so if that's the case, then our recommendation for Article 3, we want to say that we recommend that we raise and appropriate 400,000 and appropriate 484,000 from the overlay for the purpose stated in the article.
Right. So if you look at that one that's sort of colorful and shows general stabilization, right? The beginning balance of the 6.337.
Yeah, there it says raise and appropriate, but in the warrant draft it says.
No, that's my fault. I'll correct that.
Yep, that's fine. So that's why I read it the right way when I said that's what our recommendation would be.
But do we need to raise and appropriate if we already appropriated it in July, like it says in the warrant?
No.
We're putting it back in.
We're putting it back in.
Right, but if we change, so it says an appropriation of 400,000 was approved in July, right? We wouldn't raise and appropriate it now.
No,
Okay,
it's
let me clarify.
Okay, sorry.
The appropriation. No, you're good question, right? The appropriation was from stabilization, so we appropriated money from stabilization to the operating budget. What this raise and appropriate is basically saying is we're going to raise and appropriate $400,000 that's going to go back into stabilization to replace that money. So we're not reappropriating the same 400. We basically said we're taking 400 out in July, and this will put 400 back plus another 484 from the overlay.
Okay, thanks.
So Mr. Murphy had his hand up first. I'll get to you in a second, Dan.
I do. I have a question. Can we hold off doing anything with 44? Because I'm of the opinion we should do something with our pension. And I think we need more time to think about and what's our process, what we're going to do, rather than putting it into stabilization. Can we just leave it and then deal with it and come May?
I guess in theory we could.
We've still got more work to do on the pensions.
Well, that's why I want to say,
no.
let's think about it and do something with the 484.
What I would suggest is that we do some work with it, and that we put it in stabilization, but that we make it clear in the warrant that this is potentially for the use of prepaying or setting aside some money for the pension, so that when rating agencies or anybody look at what we're doing, they see that if we do end up taking the money out, we have an upfront sort of rationale for it.
Right, which is what we did with.
Shouldn't we just leave it alone and then deal with it as opposed to moving it in and then moving it out? Because we do need 3/4, correct? To take anything out, or 2/3?
2/3.
2/3, yeah.
Out of the stabilization. So if we just leave it on the table, deal with it in May, we're not doing it and we'll only need a majority. Not that.
But we can invest it in stabilization.
I was going to say we can invest it in the meantime. So, Travis, you wanted to comment?
Well, I think you made the point, right? I think, previously before the OPEB strategy, the money went into the general stabilization was sort of earmarked. I think
Right.
That conversation can certainly be had, and it can come back out of stabilization for that purpose if that's everybody's intention.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that I think Ben did bring up a good point, though, that we should sort of put in something somewhere to basically just sort of save what we may do with some of this money, just so it doesn't look like we're using stabilization down the road to fund pension or anything.
Don't want to deceive the rating agencies, right? But
we just want to make a paper trail clear for the rating agencies of what our potential intentions of this money is.
Right, which is what we did with OPEB, right? We told them when we put it in that it's going to come out when we establish the trust. And in this case, it might be the same thing, that there might be some amount of this that's going to come out once we determine what we're doing about our pension obligation.
Exactly.
So, but I do think we should put it in. I don't think the difference between a majority and 2/3 is.
Okay.
First of all, I don't think it would be a problem, but also I think put the money to work for us, so to speak, in the meantime. So. And the reality is, if we got the pension thing off the ground, I'd want it to pass with a 2/3 vote. So.
Okay.
So I will, the correction here is that I mistakenly put free cash, so as it shows there, and do you want me to share the screen with the overall look here, Ken?
Oh, you can if you want. Yeah, that would at least make it easier for me to stop going back and forth, which is what I'm doing right now.
All right, so this is the sort of all the buckets lists, right? So Article 1, 2, 3, 4, we're on 3 right now. So if you look at the original balance of the stabilization fund, which is where we are on Article 3, it went into the July town meeting with a balance of 6.7 unaudited, but that was the balance. And we used 400,000. Now we're talking about moving 400,000 from the tax levy, raise and appropriate, the 484 from overlay, for a total of 884 going in. That would lead to a projected balance of 7.22 million at the end of the year. I think that's, especially the uncertainty and the conversation that we had when it came to Rep. Dykema and Senator Spilka. I think, that was sort of the suggestion, was to make sure that we had that in good standing.
Mr. Alfred?
Yeah, this is a nitpicky thing, but it says estimated cost unknown. I assume that'll be filled in once we make these decisions.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on a second. Okay, so is everybody fine with Article 3? As I said, I said the motion would be that we recommend that the town raise and appropriate $400,000 and appropriate $484,000 from the overlay for the purpose stated in the article.
And where are you saying we put a note somewhere in our note, in our memo, or your
About
letter?
the pension stuff?
Yeah.
That could be added either to the select board comments, or we could add that in comments, or I could put it in the warrant message if you wanted to.
Put it everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm good just throwing a comment in here that one possible, sort of rerouting in the future would be to put some of this stabilization towards addressing the pension liability.
Yes.
That's fine.
I think it's a strong message.
Okay,
So I made the motion.
right.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further discussion on our recommendation for Article 3? Okay, hearing none, I'll proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so that we have a recommendation for Article 3. Okay, Article 4 is the capital expenditure fund, and this is, just to be clear, this is the putting money into the fund. The taking money out is the next article, which we'll talk about because we're going to probably defer that, but we can have some discussion about that. But anyway, so Article 4, and again, you can look at Travis's summary sheet if you want to see where these amounts come from and what it's going to do. But for this would be, the motion would be that we recommend that the town raise and appropriate $325,000 and appropriate $1,419,775 from free cash for the capital expenditure fund.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on this one?
Let's look at what we're spending it on.
But
Let's look at what we're spending it on. Where's that sheet?
And Mr. Chair, if you don't mind,
go ahead, Fred.
the one thing I would say is after this article, which includes, so Article 1, 3, and 4 are the raise and appropriate ones, it leaves what we can assume will be $500,000 or more in unused levy capacity, which I believe is an intention of a previous article that now sort of would not necessarily be needed, but the intent would be here to essentially leave unappropriated about $500,000 or more, which would impact the tax rate sort of directly and indirectly.
Right. So that was the conversation we had earlier about potentially. Go ahead, Mr. Alfred.
Right. So the taxes will go up less than they would have otherwise done for 1 year. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that the levy's not going down. So next year we will probably try to spend what we normally do is we spend up to the levy. So it could be the taxes are a little lower next year, but then higher. Sort of almost.
Right. It's a one-time thing.
Then you would expect to increase for the following year.
Right, but just to be clear, that was our intent in having the discussion earlier, was that if we want to do this, it was to help people through the difficult time of the pandemic.
Absolutely, and I'm in favor of it. I just want to make sure that, you know, and actually this year though, taxes should be down anyway, just because of the
Yes, the schools. Yes, people will finally see the schools being paid off, and on December 28th.
You've been promising
The first round of the schools.
You've been promising since I got onto the board, however many years ago that was. And
Hey, I said last October that we paid it off December 1 of 2019, which means it shows up in the tax bill on December 28th of 2020.
But anyway, so the replacement of the air packs and bottles for the fire department. When was the last time we did that? Anyone?
Well, hold on. That's Article 5. Let's get through Article 4 first.
I thought we were in our, we're just moving the money now. Okay.
We're just putting the money in right now.
Okay. I apologize.
So does anybody have any? We have the motion and the second on the floor. Any further discussion on that? Okay, let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, so now we have a recommendation for Article 4. So let's move on to Article 5. And now, before we begin the discussion about some of the specifics, I will say right now, I would recommend that we talk about items now because we want to decide what we want to do about some of these, but that we will defer making a recommendation because the two highlighted in yellow, the school committee is meeting on Thursday to formalize and vote their request. So we'd have to revote next week depending on what they do. So we'll just defer the vote on this article till next week, but we can discuss while we have Travis here and while we may get additional information, we can discuss the individual expenses. So Mr. Alfred, you wanted to start us off.
Sure. So the replacement air packs and bottles, I guess the chief isn't here today, but when was the last time we did that? That's a huge expense. And I assume this is with the breathing devices and whatnot for the fires,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So when was the last time we
I couldn't tell you the year. Actually, I may have the year on
I
there.
was going to say, we have it in one of the other documents, Travis.
Yeah, let me-
this is on the capital plan for now?
Yeah, so this was the one where I was hoping at least the grant was going to knock off a sizable chunk of this, and we did get the letter. I had to let the capital subcommittee know at our last meeting that the letter was denied. The first time these were replaced, it did. That was in there. That was how it was done. So at this point, he can't get them serviced because they're at that point. So let me just pull up the backup here.
I remember the conversation. It's 15 years, and the reason
That's what I was just looking. It was somewhere in here.
models can only be retested and put back into service until they hit a lifespan of 15 years.
Right.
I also remember the chief was talking about, so that's the bottles, and there's several components to these. There's also the regulators and the equipment that the bottles fit on, and that they use to bring into the structure. Parts of those are not even available to be replaced. The last time he brought them into the vendor for maintenance, the vendor had to scavenge through discontinued parts to furnish ours. So we are past the life cycle on these.
So it's 15. So we're talking about 15-year-old plus equipment.
Yes, over 15 years old. And just as an FYI, we didn't pay for them last time because we got a grant to cover them last time.
Okay. No, for some reason I thought we had done something with them, but again, there's so much apparatus in the fire department that I'm sure I'm getting it mixed up with something.
And that
15
grant was
years.
what Travis was referring to, by the way, that we didn't get this time. So
And is it fair to say that this is a critical piece of fighting fires?
Absolutely.
I would say the way the AFG grant works, just, we didn't get it this round, which is unfortunate. That would have helped this list substantially, obviously. But we can apply to the AFG grant moving forward too. This isn't the only thing they cover, so them denying us this time, hopefully will help us the next round that we got denied now. But it would have been obviously better if they had come through.
So the only other question I have is, a number of years ago, I forget, I can't remember how many, 3 years, 4 years ago, we started replacing the police vehicles from sedans to SUVs. At the time, we were told that the expected life expectancy would actually increase from about 3 years to 6 years, almost doubling them. But still, we're replacing sort of 3 a year. So I'm just sort of wondering, am I missing something? Are we still? I mean, is it are we still in the process of replacing the equipment that was there? Is this replacing sedans into SUVs, or is it that we're not actually finding that the SUV span is actually the 6 years that we thought it was?
I'd have to bring in Chief Stone to answer that question directly. I think in terms of, when, especially with the police vehicles, the useful life of these things, and we tried not to idle and do all those, but they go through pretty quickly. So I can check when, what changed from the last time you're talking about, because I don't honestly have that in my notes here. But that, our goal right now is to sort of turn over 2 cruisers a year with 1 administrative vehicle a year, totaling the 3. And the only adjustment I made here was assuming the increase because the market has gotten has increased. So I just wanted to reflect that.
But let's, and I understand I'm not going to hold this up because of this, but I would like a little more information, because that has been our policy since I joined the board in 2012. And I would have thought that at some point we would have actually been able to sort of reduce the rate if we were really getting double the life cycle, double the lifespan of a lot of the vehicles. So I just, so a little more clarity. If it turns out we're not seeing that, then maybe, because the SUV was slightly more expensive, I believe. Is it worth looking at? I know they like the SUVs for different reasons too, because in the winter they're more they have greater utility in bad weather and whatnot. So maybe it's just it's moot, but that'd be good. But again, I'm flying on board with that.
Yeah, since this will obviously go till next week, I can bring that back for you.
I'm clearly going to give the schools some grief for asking for even more Chromebooks.
Okay. Mr. Murphy.
I just have a question. Is it typical to replace the air packs all at once? Or is it kind of like you put it up as a maintenance item and part of the regular budget as opposed to the CapEx budget?
Oh,
So
Are you going to answer that, Tim, or is that?
well, I would defer to the chief and Travis, but there's definitely other models than what we're doing. I think we're a victim of, in the past, being successful with getting grants. So now these come up in boluses.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly put us on this schedule. I don't think we have the opportunity right now to do it sort of in pieces because of how this played out. Actually, I see Michael Cassidy in the waiting room, and I've entered him somehow.
You must have heard me talking about him.
That's right.
So your question was, couldn't this be done in more?
Yeah, just like we did. We moved the computers from being a CapEx to this being something to be an operational, and similarly having the same thought pattern. Why are we, if we need to replace air packs and we're having problems even finding equipment, God forbid we actually have to get in there and the equipment's breaking down. And
Chief Cassidy.
Yeah.
Could you hop on? We're talking air packs and bottles.
Fun.
He has not moved for weeks.
I love talking about air packs and bottles. What's the question?
Question is, why are we doing it as a CapEx versus kind of a replacement through the operational budget? Can we do a plan, get us up to date, but maybe going forward have some sort of plan that we add it to the operational budget?
Well, I think this is a larger conceptual discussion with regards to what we use as part of the normal course of our duties as to whether it's something that we want to replace all at once when they reach end of life. It's not really something that, so they've got a 15-year shelf life. So do we start replacing some of them in 5 years and take some that still have 10 years of serviceable life left in them?
So is it accurate, Chief, that this was Tim's point, which I think is probably how this came about? We replaced most of these through a grant 15 years ago, and that put us on this cycle where they're all up essentially at one time 15 years later?
Correct. And when we did it 15 years ago, the previous crop of them, which had been paid for by the town at a town meeting appropriation, had also were ending near end of life as well.
So is that, I understand your point, Vin. I think it's a good one. I think it's just sort of, this is a byproduct of our good fortune with grants in the past.
Yep. Okay. Just something to ponder and think. That's all.
Well, with the question is, would there be a benefit to doing it that way, right? It's something like when you look at the technology budget and you have regular computer replacement, is there a benefit to having that kind of rolling replacement? I don't necessarily see this as in the same light, because I think that you want to have compatible equipment across the board, right? So I assumed you'd want to do an all at once thing.
Yeah, I mean, the air bottles, it wouldn't be so bad if some of those were different dates, but the packs themselves, in terms of ability for personnel, regardless of what company they're on, to use a pack and not have to think, oh, I'm on, the 2025 edition as opposed to the 2023 edition. In the middle of the night, we want them to be able to deploy these things without thinking.
Okay. So what's the thinking? Well, actually, we have what I see. One more hand. Michelle still has her hand up. So, go ahead, Michelle.
Are we done with the fire?
Oh, we had the articles open for discussion. If anybody has anything else about fire, then go ahead and speak up now. About the bottles, go ahead and speak up now. But if not, go ahead, Michelle.
I had a question about the library.
Go right ahead.
So I guess it's for James. So what's going on with the library?
You there, James? He also gave me a breakdown of both of the, oh, there he is.
Yeah. Hey.
I think that cost breakdown you sent me, James, would be good. I added it to the backup that they received, but I don't know if we got a chance to look at that. So if you want to highlight those costs that go into that and just that project in general.
Yeah, so this is work related to replacing the carpet in the building. A lot of the areas are ripped and torn. There's bumps and ripples in the carpet, as well as repairs to the plaster. There was some water leaking in the front part of the building that's created, the old horsehair plaster has flaked away and there are cracks. The building itself, the internal parts of the building haven't been painted in probably 15 years. So this money is to go to replace the carpet as well as do the plaster repairs and repaint. The breakdown, and I don't have my notes here in front of me, I apologize, but I believe the amount is 40, or was it $40,000, Travis?
Let me look at your email.
No, I think it was $60,000 for the carpeting, and it's a carpet tile system so that if a tile or the things that, high traffic areas like in front of the checkout booths, where we can replace in the future just sections of these carpet tiles as opposed to the whole, section of the floor. The big cost, unfortunately, with the replacing the carpet is labor associated with moving book racks and moving tables and all those types of things. So that's why that cost is so high. The remaining, is it $20,000? Travis, do you have those numbers in front of you?
The library, you have $50,000 to remove the old carpet and install the new carpet tile system, and then $15,000 to repair, prep, and paint the walls in the library.
Right. So that's the breakdown. So it's $50,000 for the carpet. So that's removing the carpets, obviously, the labor associated with moving all the books, as well as, the $15,000 to do the plaster repairs, prep all the paint surfaces, all the wall surfaces, and then repaint.
And is it on the capital management plan?
Say that again.
Is it in the I always forget the official.
Asset management plan?
No, but this has been.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is, Travis?
Well, it wasn't. It might be now, but it wasn't something that had been planned for, was it, Travis? All of it like this?
So it had been in the one that I rolled forward from Ben was sort of the discussed, and it may have been that I pulled it from the previous time that it had been brought up to this group. So if I could just, with the conversation we had with the capital subcommittee, right, I think there's a couple things for this one and COA. I'll just talk in general about both, but, I think they each have their separate merits. Is that, I think ideally speaking, with a facilities manager going forward, we won't get to a point where we come up with such a large project all at once. Essentially managing this as we go, and as James said, replacing pieces that can be done through this system as opposed to, what needs to be done now on a larger scale. Would be that we can avoid this being in a such a sizable $65,000 range by actually having a facilities manager to maintain these spaces. The other thing that I think, for these two that may make more sense now than they had in the past when they were brought forward was the COA, the senior center itself, and the library currently obviously have significantly less foot traffic through COVID. And it's an opportunity to get these done without significant service disruptions at the moment that I think really benefits these projects. And then the idea being with the facilities manager, once this is done, refresh this space. And then it's on us to sort of maintain it and not get into a position where we need to do something so sizable in the future.
Thank you.
Just to interject, these were on, I believe, a couple warrants ago, and I think they kept on getting deferred. So, in terms of being on the capital improvement plan but I know they were certainly on the spring warrant and removed. I believe they were on the special town meeting of basically a year ago. And were deferred at that point as well, but I could be mistaken.
Okay. Well, the question, and I'll tell you, I brought this up with Travis earlier, and this is something I guess we want to discuss. If you recall, especially with the senior center maintenance, which is right below that on the list there, we'd had the discussion about whether that was capital or not, because it's really maintenance in some sense. I mean, not in some sense, it is maintenance, right? It's normal upkeep of the facility. So while in aggregate, it could be considered capital because it's a large enough expense, all told, with the carpeting and the painting and also, I guess, we had originally taken this out for that reason because we said it should be maintenance. Now, I don't think it's worth going crazy over because it's got to get done one way or the other in some sense. So whether we call it capital or not, whether we were to take the money and put it into the facilities budget so that he could oversee, that kind of thing. I don't think we necessarily want to go too crazy about that now, but I just wanted to bring that up because I think going forward, my personal preference would be these types of issues should be dealt with via a budget we set up for James to do maintenance, right? We've talked about that in the past. We funded that through public buildings in the past. So I think that we don't want to see stuff like this coming through capital in the future. So, Mr. Murphy.
What exactly are we doing at the senior center as we segue from that?
At the senior center, it's also carpeting, replacing carpeting, it's painting, and it's the ceiling tiles, the suspended ceiling tiles.
So the breakdown there, James, I'm reading James's email to James, but $20,000 to remove the old carpet and install the new carpet tile system, which is the same conversation you just had. $10,000 prep and paint the walls, and then $10,000 to remove and replace the ceiling tiles throughout the building. I've not actually ever got the opportunity to be in the senior center, but I understand that to be the issue.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Nersessian, you were next, then I'll get to you, Mark.
Yeah. Travis, did you send us that breakdown? I was trying to find it.
The breakdown
of what you just read off for the senior center and the library, and if so, just what date was it? I've been looking back through my emails and I couldn't seem to find it.
Oh, sorry. So the email that I sent today that included Article 5 it had its own sort of separate file. You know, the one pagers that I've been working on implementing. In that one pager for the library and the COA, I added James's breakdown of costs for each of those items.
Okay.
And so that, just as an update, because the capital subcommittee, I haven't got a chance to say, I think I'm going to try to use those one pagers for capital requests from departments. I think I'm going to try to get that rolling up through People GIS, which is a system we have in town that could accommodate it. But that's just a movement.
Okay. So some of I guess one question I had is everybody back to work full time that in all of the departments?
We've been on site in town hall since I got here. I mean, the buildings that are closed to the public are police and fire, but they've been full-time. DPW's been full-time. Yeah, I'm not aware of anybody sort of on.
And then how about library? Because I know they're doing it looks like they're doing outside pickup, but I guess the question was, is there any, because I think part of the cost for the library was, labor to move books, et cetera. And if we have resources that we can deploy into doing that and save some money. And I don't remember what the cost was, but anywhere we can sort of save and utilize people that may not be fully deployed, that would be great.
Okay. No, and I think that's a great point. For any of these, I'd be looking for that. I think just one point that you made on the capital subcommittee call that I wanted to make here was, we have the first on the list here, the facilities manager vehicle. One thing that the capital subcommittee asked us to do is go back and get a new quote, see if we can get a sort of previous year model type of thing through the state contract. So a couple of those, we'll be doing our due diligence on, but I think that's a good point, especially I don't really like a lot of labor components in capital projects, so that's certainly something we'd be addressing.
Okay. Thanks, Travis. That was it. Thanks again.
Okay. Mr. Whitaker.
I had a quick question for Mr. Keys. To the carpeting tiles that you're using, are they going to be the same across all the buildings, or are you doing different, like blue at the senior center or red at the library or something crazy like that?
Yeah, the tiles, the nice thing about the tiles, the basic design is the same, and we would definitely make them interchangeable between the buildings, but you can choose, like a place like the library, especially down in the children's room in the basement, I'll probably go with multicolors. But the big advantage of those tile systems is that, if there's a stain in one, or one gets ripped or torn or worn, you're not replacing the whole thing, you're just replacing a section. So,
the question I was trying to get after was more along the lines of, buying in bulk that could go across multiple buildings, as opposed to buying, some small subset for this room, some small subset for that room, and frankly, I think it's probably a moot question. So it's, because you could do any color anywhere based on what you just said. It just might not look quite as nice.
Right. I don't think there's a reason why we can't, even though there's separate items, maybe, and I'll talk to Travis about this, that, when we bid out these jobs, that we include both buildings to sort of bulk buy. So, the contractor that we choose is going to be doing the work at both buildings.
Please just make sure that when we go to contract and sorry for not raising my hand, but that we have very specific warranty coverage, and so that if something goes wrong, that we are able to go back and get it to be fixed for free, and that we're not having to replace it ourselves.
Absolutely.
Given some of the challenges we've had in the past. So.
Okay. So just as Travis mentioned this before, if you look at what was sent today in that packet, there was a thing that said Article 5 Capital. And you pull it up and you see the one page, but then if you scroll down, it's actually got 23 pages where each of these expenses has the form and the details. So just in case you missed that before, there's a lot of detail on a lot of these things in there. That was what was reviewed by the capital subcommittee. So, okay. So the other thing I wanted to point out about this Article 5 stuff was, one of the things that we discussed at the subcommittee was the radio interoperability, $30,000, because as you may recall, we just approved a much larger amount in July for radio operability. And so it immediately raised my red flag of what happened to the amount we just had 6 months ago, that we need $30,000 more. So I think just for the sake of anybody who's watching, there's an explanation there, and I don't know if Travis, you want to give it, or you want Chief Cassidy to give it, but you can cover it if you want to just discuss why there's a request for $30,000 more for that.
Chief, you want me? No.
I can cover it.
Okay.
So the issue is when we went to the owner of the Mellon Street Tower, which is the location of our repeater for both public safety agencies. We had previously been under the impression from talking to the radio contractor as well as the tower climber that because the Mellon Street Tower had been reinforced in recent years, that adding 2 3-foot dishes, microwave dishes, would not be an issue. However, when we reached out to the owner of the tower, they required an engineering study, and their engineering study said, "Oh no, you can't possibly put that equipment on the tower without reinforcing it further." So we are currently in the process of an engineering modification design whereby they will tell us how much additional steel will need to be added to the tower to reinforce the section where our 2 3-foot microwave dishes will go. So the $30,000 includes 3 components: the modification design, which is $3,500, the labor for the tower climbers to install whatever bracing is specified by the design, and then the actual materials for the bracing that will need to be installed.
Okay, so any questions on that one? I just wanted to make sure, because I remember, as I said, I didn't want that everybody sit there and say, why is this money coming up again? But so it's for an extra strong antenna, I guess. Okay. The other thing I want to ask about the library and the senior center was, is there any possibility of energy implications to any of this? And that's probably for James, like in terms of the carpeting, the tile, is there something that we could do with mass save with regarding lighting? Or, I mean, does any of this have any energy implications where we might be able to pursue, an energy audit or something that might help us with any of these issues? I don't know if they may be totally outside of that, but I just want to ask.
Yeah, I mean, not for the carpeting or the painting and things. Maybe the tiles. All of these buildings have had, through the green communities, energy audits. A lot of them had LED light conversions and those types of things, weatherization around the windows. So I would say in this case, for the work that we're proposing to be done from a green community standpoint, it wouldn't apply.
Okay. Okay, so does anybody else have any other questions? Now, as I said, on this particular article, I would defer a recommendation because the 2 school items are not yet voted by the school committee. They're taking them up this Thursday, so we'll do it. But obviously, if you have any further questions, or if you look at this, again, if you have questions, I'd encourage you to go back and look at the material Travis sent. It's got a bunch of the detail. If you have any further questions between now and next week, just feel free to reach out to either me or to Travis to get some information. But all of these were, and I'll get to you in a second, Tim, all of these were, at some level vetted by the entire capital subcommittee. So go ahead, Mr. Maxwell.
So it's not really a question, it's more a comment. I just wanted to bring a little attention to the support and engagement from Mr. Keeston and Mr. Ahern over the last couple months. I think their engagement, the materials they're supplying, the forms that they're creating to make this more planned and predictable, that in just terms of getting information to us, is a huge improvement. And I want to say thank you. And there's always room for continuous improvement, but I found this much more useful than in the past. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Okay, so we'll defer a recommendation on Article 5. Let's go on to Article 6. Let me pull that back up. I have 14 different windows here. Okay, which is CPC. And before anybody asks, both Travis and I discussed this. He reached out to Frank to get an update. Frank is aware that we're meeting today and that we're meeting next week. So I'm trying to get him in. Obviously, I don't think he's going to be here today, but I will try to get him in for next week. This, as it's written right now, is what was approved by CPC for inclusion. So this stuff has already been approved, so he should be able to, hopefully I can get him in next Tuesday and we can deal with anything further on that one. So, okay. Okay, so next up, Article 7, which is the sidewalk improvements, railway drainage sidewalk. This is for basically Mudville, okay? We had some discussion about this, but I'll just throw it open for questions, about all this stuff. So anybody have any questions about this one?
The Article 7?
Article 7, I believe, yes. I keep having to move the window aside. So yes, Article 7.
We basically kind of overspent our Chapter 70 money. Is that kind of?
Chapter 90.
Chapter 90.
Don't say Chapter 70, you'll get the schools all excited. So.
Or at least the cost of, so my only question is, if we're not gonna be able to do this till April 21, why not just delay it another 2 months and use some next year's?
So Do you mind if I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead, Travis.
All right, so this one had some conversation back and forth with the select board, also the capital subcommittee, and I forget exactly, honestly, where I've had the discussion with this group. So let me just start from the beginning. There was a crossover with a water main project that went downtown, that went in that area, right? So one of the questions was, is this essentially an overage of that project? The answer to that was no. Obviously, I had to go digging. I wasn't here in the beginning of this. So essentially, this project, when it comes to drainage, sidewalks, roadway improvements in the area, was a project that the highway department had on its high on its list. It sort of got said, don't go ahead with that project, obviously, until the water main project goes ahead. The water main project included certain, putting the roadway back into shape. So there's still some finances left from that water main article that will go towards the finishing out of this project. There's also Chapter 90 money. There's also sort of capital expenditures for some of the items within their budget. At the end of the day, before they put this out to bid, they're saying with the money left from the water main article, with what they have available through Chapter 90 and what they have available through their budget to get this project done, where they think the bids are going to come in, $353,000 is sort of the minimum delta. I honestly, looking at their finances, would prefer that we increase this number. One, because it actually assumes the use of some Chapter 90 money from next fiscal year of about $65,000 that I think we would just be in better shape as a town if we did not do that. We would be better off if we, because of what we're doing with CapEx and in sort of the highlight of all of this, increase that by $65,000 from the 353. I think what the DPW wanted to do was sort of ask you for what they felt like was the bare minimum here to get it done, and obviously on that timeline that I laid out in the write-up of the article. So 353 again is not an overage on that article, and it's not an overage at Chapter 90. It's sort of the delta of what they have available and what they believe the project's going to come in at.
Okay. Now one question, Travis, and I know I've raised this before, but just for the whole committee's sake, going forward, it certainly has been our understanding that when we've done the water main work, that has included resurfacing the road afterwards, doing the curbing, the sidewalk, and all this. So just to be clear, that is, we have articles later, right, for main replacement. So just to be clear, that is part of the main replacement that we're speccing out going forward. In other words, it's not just we put the pipe in the ground and then we just pave over it. It's the part, it is, there's stuff in here like catch basins, drainage piping, whatever. But I'm saying that it is a correct assumption that as we're replacing the water mains, we are fixing the curbing and the sidewalks on these roads as well and doing the resurfacing afterwards.
Right, and so a lot of times that will be laid out in the article. I think the idea here is that the project that the highway had in mind before the water main project was put in place had a larger scope than the water main project could realistically sort of encompass. At some point there is, I think this town has been very good about sort of, and we'll talk about it in a later article, about saying, what's good for one is good for all. But generally speaking, when it's a water main article, we say what is reasonably could be charged to a water main article. And that can be sidewalks sometimes, especially if they need to be disturbed. It can be putting the roadway back in shape. But this, when it comes to some of these drainage components and all those other things, because it's a complicated area, I think we all know that just sort of fall into the highway department more so than the water article.
Okay, Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, my question is, do you want to go back? Should we just table this and you talk to the select board and ask them to increase it by 65,000? If you don't think the 353 is sufficient, then we don't want to tap into the Chapter 90. We have other roads we have to deal with. So
Well, that's
what wouldn't we do if we ended up tapping into the Chapter 90 money is what I'd be concerned about.
Right, and $65,000 is not going to be our full Chapter 90 allotment next year, but by sort of anticipating and getting this project fully funded in this article and not having to look at it future sort of revenue, I think it would be beneficial to the town, and I can certainly bring that back to the select board. At the time that I brought this to them, after that I sat down with Sharon and sort of went through all the assumptions in here. And, you know, I also took the message to heart from the chair here, who is, you know, I think people are sort of not liking when things need to come back in front of the group, when there's not enough sort of allocated. So that would be my, at the same point, 353, based on the way that they've drawn up the figures they're comfortable with, I would be my recommendation to sort of look at whether or not it makes more sense to do the 65 on top of this while we're approaching the article.
Okay, Sue?
Yeah, I was just, since this is such a, just a discrete area in town, is this the only area that needs this, or is this just this year's area that needs this?
This would be closing out that area, essentially. This would be the project that sort of gets highway done with that area. The water main project is now done. The money left in that article to do the surface is available for this project. They'd like to get this appropriation to finish that and be out of the area.
Okay, so there aren't any other roadway drainage and sidewalk improvements that are needed around town? This is the only one.
This is the one that we're sort of doing on this cycle.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
I mean, through Chapter 90, which is the great thing about Chapter 90, is they obviously have the ability as areas pop up and they can plan other projects throughout town. And that's my other concern. Again, with planning to use some of next year's money means that's one less thing they can do next year with Chapter 90 money.
But it's not your intent to annually be using $500,000 of town capital to supplement Chapter 90.
No. I mean, if that's a policy decision that everybody wants to go with, because we'd like to be more aggressive, we can certainly have that conversation. But this is not setting policy. This is related to closing out this project.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll get to you in a second, Michelle. I just want to clarify, just to make sure, since you can hear it directly from the chair, the comment I made to Travis, which he correctly stated, was, I said, I, as an individual, and I don't believe the finance committee likes it when someone comes to us and swears up and down that this is going to be the cost of a project, and then they come to us 6 months later and say, I need another, 20%, 30%, or some dollar amount on top of that. Because it's, on the other hand, we obviously don't want people coming in with super inflated figures either. But I said to him, reasonable overages make sense. Like if you come in and you say, okay, we started the project and we discovered this problem, and so there was some extra money. But what I don't like is when, like to give you an example, the interoperability question we just had, right? When I saw that, my first question was, we literally approved this less than 6 months ago. And already there's a request to put 30,000 more into it. And again, you heard the explanation as to why that makes sense. So I'm okay with that. But my first thought was, it's not a good look for the town if we're on a continual basis coming back right after we say to the town, hey, this is what it's going to take. But wait, we were wrong. It needs more. And so we've had in my mind, a higher number of projects like that recently. And so I was just impressing upon Travis to say, I don't like the pattern we're seeing here, where we're seeing more and more projects coming back for money very soon after we approve them, when we're going to the town and saying this is what it's going to take. Because it's obviously we want to be as forthright with the town to the best of our knowledge. And it's not like anybody's doing anything duplicitous, but we want to, if our estimates are continually off, we want to look at that and say, we got to do a better job with our estimates. That's all I was kind of conveying to him. So anyway, Michelle.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused. Is it that if there is if we're short, does work stop and then we have to wait until next fiscal year? Or does work continue and then we can take that money next fiscal year? Is it going to be where like the roads are going to be unpaid for months?
So July 1.
Yeah, how does that work?
No, I think if you look at this based on this schedule, it would sort of be relying on future spending because this is obviously an article, so it doesn't have the shelf life of June 30th, right? It travels beyond that. This would essentially be assuming as we get into next fiscal year that some of the Chapter 90 money would be used as we progress through the project. And that's the $65,000 that I'm saying. Do you mind if I just share the screen again?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so if we look at this, my only point is this, right? So if we're looking at the capital expenditure line here, right, with the balance that we had after the July town meeting of almost $7 million, and what we're doing in Article 4 of sort of putting the money in, knowing that we have some projects here that we're approving, and then this being the other Article 7 being the other article that I have laid out to hit CapEx. All of that activity is actually increasing the bottom line in the CapEx by $250,000 at the end of all this activity. That putting in the $65,000 here so as not to sort of rely on Chapter 90 going into FY22 still puts us in good position, I think, with where, you know, the sort of policies are as I read them, and I think the intent of this committee, I think it just sort of helps us operationally, puts us in better position. That's my real thought. At the end of the day, if it's not supported, it's not going to stop this. I just think it's a better way for us to approach this project.
Okay, yeah, because I was looking at it, says April 2022. It's hard to say 2022. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that things weren't going to stop.
Well, put it this way, if that did happen, that would be a good thing, because that would mean they were way ahead of schedule.
Okay,
So.
and then my other question was, is the chapter, what project then wouldn't be done because you're anticipating money for that project? How far down the line are projects lined up for the Chapter 90 money that would take away money for something else?
Yeah, I'd have to look at the total list of the Chapter 90 sort of projects to see what could be done realistically within 22 if $65,000 was available that is currently assumed to be going to this. But I can certainly bring that back next week.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, as you know, we talked about that earlier. I said it might be something to discuss because of that very reason, right? Which is the idea of pulling money out of future, you know, obligating future funds may or may not be what we want to do here. So, so what is the preference of the committee? Do you want to defer a recommendation till we get additional information and possibly a changed amount from the select board?
Yes.
Do we want to? Okay, so
That's my opinion. I don't know what everybody else, but that's
I agree.
see, that's a good thing about a virtual meeting. You can all give me the thumbs up, and I don't have to poll everybody. So, okay. So we'll defer action on Article 7 till we get the additional information and possibly a change. Okay. 8 is the sidewalk prioritization plan. And Mr. Ahern, do you want to say anything about that before we get into the discussion?
No, I think I don't think Ben Sparrow's on here. I thought he was going to be, but so he I think has sort of taken the approach of working through, you know, some changes to this, or you know, sort of the narrative on it with the DPW liaison. So obviously Vin and Michelle could weigh in. I think one thing we could sort of point out here really is that we think, you know, I think one of the conversations I understand happened around this the last time it came up was, you know, are we committing to sidewalking the whole town? And I think the answer to that, you know, should be understood to be no. I think one of the real benefits of this article is it's going to put us in position to pursue grants in specific areas. And I think one of, you know, the real goals in my mind would be to say, are there smaller projects or are there projects that we should be prioritizing that increase connectivity to the network that we already have before we sort of address, you know, really whether or not we want to be increasing the network in any substantial way. But, you know, one thing came up on an article that's coming up shortly in terms of the Winter Street water main project when it was sort of, you know, should we be looking at sidewalks here? And the answer that I had to say was, well, I don't know. Is that a sidewalk project that is a bigger priority than others? I think that this would sort of give us a path forward to sort of be able to say in some areas that we have areas that we identify, if we have grant opportunities in the future, if we have a developer who is sort of in the area in the future, that we know we want something, you know, in that space, and we would be interested in sidewalks if the opportunity pops up. And so, yeah, I think prioritization at this point would be beneficial. And as I said, I think Ben was sort of trying to work that through with your committee, the liaisons, and I thought he would be on here to mention if he needed to, but if there's any questions.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the intent is not to have this lead to some giant capital project with, you know, borrowing or something like that. It's more to pursue grants and other funding opportunities to help with our sidewalk system and the complete streets and safe routes to schools and all those things.
So kind of, like,
Well, okay, well, Sue was
Oh,
first. I'll
sure,
give her-
yep.
yeah, thanks. Go ahead, Sue.
So I guess I'm a little challenged still with why we need to have this in order to apply for grants. What's the benefit of having a $40,000 study? Especially, I continue to be very concerned, and obviously I'm conservative, but very concerned about the economy, and I think I'm struggling as to why this would be critical now, and then why do we need it? I guess to be able to write a grant.
Okay, so Tina has got her hand up, so I'm guessing she wants to answer that.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to jump in, Travis, if you don't mind. And yeah, so I think, Sue, one perfect example that's pretty relevant to conversations going on right now is Winter Street. In order to look at sidewalks on Winter Street, we need a place to go to justify the cost, to justify the decision making. All we have is resident preference. That's a lot. I'm not dismissing that, but we don't have a study, a place to go to justify that the cost of putting in sidewalks on Winter Street is there because it connects a large population to a network that's already in place. It connects individuals to safer access because we have a known problem there in terms of safety concerns. It addresses decaying, dilapidated infrastructure because existing crosswalks and sidewalks are failing. So we don't have a place to go. So that's like an immediate concern right now. There are lots and lots and lots of other examples. I would counter what Ken had to say about this is to serve the purpose of seeking other funding opportunities and grants, although I agree with it serving that purpose. I do think that these sidewalk studies are used to help with capital planning for the town. So one expectation I would have is that in time, this comes into the asset management plan. We identify our infrastructure, our sidewalk infrastructure as an asset we want to maintain. And we use this study to help us plan that asset management piece of it. So that's what I would have to say. I don't know if that answers your question, Sue.
Yeah, I in part, I'm still struggling with it being a critical item for now, for right now,
I mean,
just given sort of where we are. And
yeah, I mean, I think the argument about how critical it is how much one sees the safety concerns. So I always point to the police reports, the monthly police reports, in terms of the number of injuries each year sustained by people who are biking and walking in Holliston. It's not zero. 2020 to date, it's 30%. So I mean, I think that's
It'll never be zero. Just
What do you mean 30?
it'll never be zero.
30%. 30% of what?
injuries sustained by crashes with vehicles.
That number doesn't make any sense. You gave me 30% of 30% of the injuries in town. I mean, how many? But what is the number that we're talking about?
It's a small number, but it's not zero. And so I'm just giving an example as to.
No, but that's important though. The percentage of injuries. If there are 2 injuries in town, and one of them happens to have been on a sidewalk or something, then it's 50%. But that means nothing because it's one injury, and it could be a fluke. So it's not zero, but it's also not 30.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that we don't have towns in Metro West that have 30 people getting hit by bikes and cars.
What is the injury per population? Are we?
If that's the point of the argument of the conversation, we can certainly go there. I wouldn't think that's the point. I'm just simply making the point that.
Well, you're making the point that you think that the Holliston is an unsafe community.
No, I'm making the point that in addressing sidewalk infrastructure, one of the key goals is to address the safety of people who bike and walk in town. That's the point I'm making. Not that Holliston is unsafe, but that we always ought to be looking to improve safety.
Okay. Travis, you want to chime in and then we'll go back. Let Sue finish up.
Yeah. So just for the timing question, in terms of importance, I think the safety component is certainly one that Ms. Heim brought up. I would say, from a planning perspective, this has already come up a couple of times when I'm looking at sort of projects and when we're looking at our capital expenditure, right? I think when the grants, you're right. I mean, can I say with this, we then are eligible for X grants? No, but in terms of trying to plan out our capital 5-year, as the chair mentioned earlier, when it came to the Mudville article, we need to be planning certain things, certain capital projects. And when we're, whether it be a water main replacement or whether it be something else, for us to be able to make decisions on what is a priority for the town, having all of this information on how these capital projects tie together, when we're doing a water main replacement that may have a significantly bigger impact by doing sort of roadway and sidewalk improvements in an area, that's information I think is going to be valuable for us moving ahead. It came up in the question about Winter Street this year, but it's come up in other areas too. And when we're working through the Complete Streets grant applications and we're working through the Safe Routes to Schools, this is just something that I think this town needs, and the sooner the better in my mind. But I do understand your point. But it's come up so many times since I've started because of all of these sort of components that I think it is time sensitive to a certain extent.
Is the goal, I think I heard you say that the goal isn't to have sidewalks all throughout town, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, and I forget if this is the second time that this has been on the warrant or the third. I forget when it originally went on. I have to be honest, I continue to struggle, especially now, just given where we are, with something like this, where we have a bike trail that is very safe for both bikers and walkers, and we've spent a lot of time and effort in that area. And I personally struggle just given our economic situation at this point. So, but I definitely appreciate the perspectives. Thank you.
I think the rail trail too, for me, would be, I think that's one thing where it's helpful. I think connectivity to the rail trail, getting people to and from safely, is one thing that I think some areas of town have better access to than others. Is one thing that I would be very interested to see.
Yeah.
How this prioritization plan came out to sort of say where we could improve to get that same level of access throughout town.
But Travis, we're not some people can walk to the rail trail. Other people have to drive, just given sort of where they're located within town. It just likely, they could walk, but it's likely not as feasible. And even from where I live, the sidewalks from here on Route 16 over to the gas station and hooking up with the trail there are horrible, and they're horrible. So you just, you're not using them. You have to use them carefully. But it just, we're in a very significantly challenged economy right now, and the COVID rates are only escalating. I'm very concerned about what that's going to mean. And I think I think a lot of people are struggling, and I only think that's going to get worse. And I just don't see this as a true critical need for right now. I'm not saying we don't need it later, but it's $40,000, and I think the town could save it at this point.
So Sue, let me just, if you don't mind, let me give another perspective, if you just tolerate it for a minute. With the Lowland Industrial Park Forum, I think you're all aware we had over 100 people tune in for that and express their concerns. And I think we ended up having about 30 people who made public comment. And I would say a solid third of those people, at least 10 to 12 of those individuals, spoke to the need for access. They spoke specifically because of the pandemic. But also beyond that they were looking for safer access. They want to have increased ability to walk and bike in their community. And so, I think the select board has to respond to that. They have to hear the concerns of people who step forward at things like the Lowland Industrial Park Forum and other forums as well, other public comment as well, who express those exact concerns. There's a call for, a need for, and a concern about sidewalk access. And so I think that the select board, again, is putting this article forward. One could say it's a preference of the select board members themselves. That may be fair. We all have our own priorities here, and that's okay. That's why we're elected. But in this particular case, this is absolutely a response to public comment that we receive resoundingly and frequently and repeatedly.
But we do have information about where sidewalks are in town already. So if someone's saying that, well, we do, and it's pretty easy to go around town, having someone drive around town to look at where their sidewalks are and take a map out. So I don't think that's a very hard thing to do. And we certainly could have done it while people were at home during the first part of the COVID situation, because you'd be safe in your car and you just take a map and go around town. So that's an easy view. I'm not saying the study wouldn't be more in depth, but it's something we could easily do to know where the sidewalks are, because that's a visual.
And we do have that, I think, and I don't want to keep bringing up Winter Street a million times, but that's another one where I just keep looking at it like, I need to know from an engineering perspective if that's viable. And I've heard both perspectives, quite frankly. And the only way, as I look forward, to look at whether or not projects and sort of prioritize them of what should be the goals of the town, or what should be sort of brought forth to the town, because we have so many competing needs, is to look at those projects. And you got to look at information that, quite frankly, our staff driving around is not going to give us from the engineering perspective. And that's what a lot of these things are, is an engineering perspective that we don't have in-house.
I agree with that, but I just don't agree with it now. So I'm not saying never. I'm just saying right now in the economic situation today, I don't think it's a critical need.
Okay.
But again, that's my personal view on this.
Okay.
Those were all my questions. So sorry, Dan, I took so long.
That's okay. Just want to make sure you get it all in. Mr. Alfred, we'll go down the hands.
Yeah, so I came into this prepared to support this, but honestly, I thought I knew sort of what the situation with this was, but Tina, I got to say, you've totally confused the heck out of me. I think that I get that you're very passionate about this. But some of the numbers you've been throwing around are kind of sort of all over the place. Not zero, but obviously it's probably like 1, and then 30% of those people who went to the Lowland Street were the 100, but then it was only 10 to 12. So it feels a little bit like we're being sort of sold sort of a little bit on sort of the amount of public demand for this that there is, and that's my view and that's my opinion. But what I want to get back to is back in February, I think at this point, because it was our, that horrible meeting we had right before COVID hit, the tri-board meeting, the prior town administrator, I think at the request of the select board, or maybe the treasurer at the request of the select board, either way, put together a debt schedule, and on it was a number of the anticipated cost of the sidewalk project that were anticipated to come from this study, and it was $24 million. Now, I've talked, and this is part of my sort of confusion. I sort of talked with Travis previously about this, and it seemed like there was not going to be anywhere near that amount of spend for this. But now it does seem like it maybe is actually a little bit more open ended. And again, for me, that I hear Sue, and I kind of have some of the same views as her, but at the same time, since we are we're not raising raising as much as we could under Prop 2.5, I do also think that we're sort of taking the taxpayers into account somewhat for that, but we don't want to just be throwing around wasting money in this time. But to me, it still comes back to, is this a $24 million project, or is this that's going to come out of this, or is it a couple $1 million that we're kind of going to be able to do over a few years here and there with some capital and maybe some free cash? Because that, as we then get into the water article and stuff, it really sort of, it starts getting back to the whole point that I've had before about whether we're prioritizing across all departments in town. And I thought when I talked with Travis, I had a good idea, but it does not seem like that's sort of where Tina's head is, and I'm kind of confused.
Okay, there's no intention to confuse anybody. I thought
I don't think you're trying to confuse me, but
no, I thought I was specifically answering a concern that Sue had as to how critical this was, and so I was putting in my perspective on the level of how critical it was. You may or may not agree with me, but in not agreeing with me, I don't think that's confusing the matter. I think the question at hand is the
numbers are confusing. Is it a $24 million sort of?
But I don't think that's the decision that's before your committee tonight. So I think the decision before the committee tonight is the article presented by. With due respect,
the decision that we're making tonight has a ramification. If it has ramifications about how big an outcome it is. Because if all of these projects are going to be something that we cannot afford, then I would say respectfully that you guys should choose which one you want and then come to us with that one. But if this is a $1 or $2 million project, then that's not the same the same question. So
I guess now it's my turn to be
respectfully, I
confused.
disagree that is part of the decision.
Okay, all right. All right. I don't know how to answer the question. I'll let maybe Travis can jump in here, but.
So the question is this a $24 million potential ask or a couple $1 million or something?
That, I'm not, okay. If we're referencing something from February, I think we need to move the conversation forward with what is in the article that was presented for this town meeting.
But the 24 million is the last number that I was given officially as a sort of expectation. Travis, I would, yes, please.
So my point has been to this, and I think the conversation that Ben with Michelle and Vin have been having to say too, is the benefits of getting this sort of engineering point of view on the sidewalk needs throughout the town is not committing us to $24 million worth of projects related to sidewalks. I think what I need as a town employee looking at future capital in this town is to sort of identify what would the cost be of certain projects so we can prioritize them, because at the end of the day, the cost of one project compared to another, if it has the same benefit to the same number of people, is going to come into the equation. So we need to know those types of things to be able to plan. The fact that we can use it when we're looking at Safe Routes to Schools and Complete Streets and go after funding is part of it as well. And all of that, as we get grant funding, beats down the cost of potential projects in the future for the town if it wanted to pursue those projects to go after. So my point is that this does not commit us to $24 million. It may come to the conclusion that if you want to put every sidewalk on every street, that would be the cost, but that absolutely is not the intent of doing the article. The intent is to have the information so that we can make decisions. And we don't have that information. We don't have that capability in-house.
All right, well, I understand none of these articles that are studies commit us, but you know it also is too, right? You spend a little bit of money, you start walking down that path, people sort of get moving along, and then all of a sudden that it just becomes sort of a self sort of requesting prophecy if it's not self-fulfilling. Okay, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, Travis, if you think this is important, and but just from my perspective, $24 million is not something that I'm at all interested in asking the taxpayers for this. So
Understood.
It's not even anywhere close. So if find as much grant money as you can, and let's keep this to reasonable numbers that we can deal with outside of any kind of override.
Okay, Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, I just resent to everybody the studies in question. It's old, it's from last March, but it does talk about the sidewalk prioritization plan, and on page 3 of 5, and starts there. But one thing it does, and one of the reasons why we want to do it now as opposed to postponing it, is we want to also have the water main study improvement plan. As we all know, our water pipes aren't the greatest, and we need to figure out a plan to replace them. And this study will be doing it in tandem, in parallel, they say, so it's ideal. Also, it's talking about, as somebody mentioned about the bike paths, it's going to be looking at a relationship to where we have sidewalks and how to get if necessary, have sidewalks near the bike path entrances so that we're not having people going and walking in the middle of the street. So it's all related. And I understand Sue's concern, but it's not like we're asking and raising additional taxes to do it. We have the money. We have the money in the CapEx fund if we didn't even use it. So I don't think it's paying for it now is a negative thing. We need to know, we have to figure out why and where we want to have sidewalks, part of the whole complete street things. And as one who probably needs to have a sidewalk on his street, I'm saying this, so I'm a little biased, but who knows if it's actually going to happen. But, we have sidewalks we really didn't even know about. Several of the select board members mentioned all the sidewalks down past the cross street, the sidewalks on the other side of the street of Route 126 and 16. So, hey, look, the sidewalks. So I think we need to have an understanding where we have the sidewalks, but also where is a good place to put sidewalks based on people's walking and the street level, the traffic and everything like that. So I would strongly recommend that we do this. That's it.
Okay, Ms. Zimmer.
The last time we discussed this, I don't mean last month, I mean in the spring, when we discussed this, I was imagining this study being done and then sitting on a shelf waiting for us to spend millions of dollars to put sidewalks in town while this project was competing with a new DPW, a new high school, accelerating water mains, under the street, and all these projects coming through at once. And I couldn't see spending $40,000 for a study that would be sitting on a shelf waiting for millions of dollars to be spent. But after, talking to Travis, talking to Ben, reading through things, I realized that there's more to this study than just millions of dollars spent putting sidewalks through town. And Ben's pretty much described it. But I did have a question because I heard something and I don't know if I misheard it. If we do this study, when we do work in town and there are sidewalks that are adjacent to, like if we put water mains in or we pave streets, do we get more Chapter 90 money to replace or repair the sidewalks because we've done this study? I don't know if I misheard that in the past. Does that study give us that ability?
No.
So this would not probably impact Chapter 90. No, Chapter 90 has an interesting formula when it relates to sidewalks. The benefit that I'm seeing specifically financially would be towards grant programs like Complete Streets and Shared Streets and Spaces.
Okay. So like it wouldn't help with the Mudville project that we discussed earlier today.
I think it probably would have identified and it would have been on the list certainly before that project sort of got in the queue. But at this point, I don't think it moves the needle there.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. So I think that if I could just summarize, in the interest of time, summarize the discussion on this, I think that there are two ways of looking at this. One is as a lead-in to grant opportunities and small dollar projects to address our sidewalk infrastructure. And another is to look at it as a lead-in to very large capital expenses related to sidewalks. And I think that, and certainly the committee can express their opinion, but based on what I'm hearing from the discussion, the feeling of the committee is that we prefer the former rather than the latter, that the intent is that going forth with this study from our point of view is not so much to lead to a whatever 24 million or multi-million borrowing for sidewalk improvements as much as it is to Travis's point of leading to better planning and better being able to address and obtain grant monies and other small dollar amounts to help further improve our sidewalks. I mean, I think that's. I just wanted to, if the committee, obviously, feel free to disagree with me, but I'm just making that point clear because I think that that's going to be important if it comes down and we do this work and then we're faced with a borrowing and we as a committee, again, we'll discuss every article on the merits, but if we were to come back and say, no, we don't support a borrowing of, again, I'm just using the 24 million number that was given to us earlier, that, I would want the town to look at us and say, well, why do you approve the study, right? If we vote to recommend this study and to get this information, it's certainly my intent, and I think the intent of several members is that it's going to enable us to move forward with planning and to address some of our sidewalk infrastructure, but we wouldn't be approving it with the intent of a follow-on very large borrowing behind it. So
that's my, as I said, that's my view.
Okay. And again, just because I just want to be clear about that. So we're on the record as kind of saying that. So how do people feel? Do somebody want to make a motion on this one? And
I would like to make a motion to,
Before you do it, this one wants to be appropriate 40,000 from free cash if you want favorable action.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to favorable recommendation from the FinCom to recommend $40,000 from free cash for the study.
To recommend that we appropriate $40,000 from free cash for the purpose stated in the article.
Yes, that's exactly what I want, Ken. Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
I will second that and simply reiterate that it's for, as Ken described, small projects planning and everything, and not large borrowing anticipated in the future.
Okay, any further discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. What?
Do we usually spend money directly from free cash?
Yeah, we can do this. This is fine.
Okay.
It's free.
That's right. It's free. It's cash. It's free. No, no.
It's just money.
That's fine. And that's why I said we have to appropriate. Once it's certified, it's available for appropriation, which is why I said appropriate. We don't have to raise and appropriate. We just have to appropriate it from free cash.
So can I just make one point on that? I don't want to belabor it. The thinking that I have, and this is sort of, I've had with the capital subcommittee, and I think this group a little bit too, would be a lot of times, as we just had this discussion, sometimes design engineering leads to capital projects. If it is a design engineering that is the design engineering of a project specifically that is going to be coming up with it, I think it makes sense through CapEx, right? It's essentially related to that particular capital project. If it's design engineering that, again, there may be capital projects that come from it, but that's not necessarily, they're tied directly to it, and we can schedule it based on that design engineering. I think free cash, generally speaking, I'm comfortable appropriating for those directly.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table. Do we have any further discussion on the motion? Okay, if not, we'll proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
I'm a no.
Okay, and I will vote yes, because I made my intent very clear that this is not going to lead to a $24 million project in my mind. So, okay, so that passes 6-1. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Article 9, the modernization plan. Okay. Anybody, I guess I'll just open this up rather than we kind of know what this is for. It's written right there. You can see it. Anybody have any questions they would like to ask about this one? Now, the one thing I will start out, because there is one question I had about this. This clearly is a broader undertaking than what was brought forth last October. And I understand that, and it's good in the sense that it's looking at things like the source water and things that are higher priority, I think, for the town. The real question here is one of the things I had an issue with last year was the reconstruction of the pipe mapping, right? We were going to be paying a lot of money for them to basically tell us where the pipes were, which we already had from 2012, I think it was 2012. So I just wanted to make clear, is that still included here? I know that the vendor is the same and said, well, it would be more expensive if we didn't have that work, but it sounded last year like they were going to do a lot of the same work over, which doesn't seem to be necessary for pipes that don't really move that far. So Travis, do you want to just, I don't know if anybody who's been involved with this wants to expound a little bit on that. So go ahead, Travis.
I think Vin or Michelle could probably more, I think, they've been going back and forth with Ben on the way that quote came out. I think my concern was that the 75 covers all that. I'm comfortable with that now. The quote I think that Vin mentioned from March has been updated again to make sure that the number is good. I think the sort of updating is one aspect of it, right? Obviously, we want to make sure that our asset management sort of reflects everything that's happened over the last decade since that was created. That's certainly one component. That's a big component. But included in that now are things that are, give us information for our capital planning for the next 5 to 10 years, but also gives us information that's going to be valuable beyond that period of time when it comes to the source. I think that was sort of the conversation got driven that way through the conversation with Ben and the liaisons. And based on the revised quote, I'm sort of satisfied that this gets us everything, I think that we need for the short and long term.
Okay. Now the other question, and I guess I should have asked this about the last article as well, but what is the shelf life of these studies, both for 8 and 9? I mean, we already took care of 8, but because the one thing I want to make clear is, from my perspective, I don't want to see this again for at least another decade, right? I don't want to do a study that we're then going to have to pay another $75,000 10 years from now and have somebody say, well, that data's old, right? Water doesn't change that much. So I just want to make sure we're clear on the intent is that this is going to take care obviously there may be other needs down the road, but I'm saying we're not going to ask for a redo and somebody's going to say, well, that's been sitting on the shelf for 5 years, so we got to go do it again. Because if that's the case, that impacts this from the point of view of if we're not prepared to move forward with some major actions in the short term, to Dan's point, right? If we do the study and then we say they're going to lead to major actions, but we're not going to have the money to do those things for 5 or 6 years or something like that, or maybe longer, if depending on what happens with the schools, do we move forward and just throw it on the shelf and then pull it off the shelf and say, well, now I got to do it again? That's kind of what it. So I'd like to know what the shelf life is.
The major problem with 9 is it can identify some place that's perfect for a well, and then the developer comes in and builds a subdivision there.
Well, presumably, you now raised another issue that I'll bring up, which is, are we going to be 1,000% clear that any test wells or well sites are on town property or property that the town has acquisition rights to? Because Travis, you're new here.
I assume that's related to something specific.
Yes.
I've not heard.
There's our famous, what I think is now well 7, or what's always been well 7, which was drilled on Army Corps of Engineer property.
That was an accident. That was a surveying accident.
Yes, it was a surveying accident, but at the end of the day, we end up with a well on property we didn't own. So just because Michelle just reminded me of that, let's make absolutely sure that whatever we get this, if we're going to move forward with this, that any well sites identified are on land that we actually have rights to.
I think we can accommodate that request.
So, believe me, it took years for well 7 to come online because of the Army. We had to get Senator Kerry involved in getting us access to the well after we drilled it. So.
And then you can't get a long-term lease.
Yeah. It took a lot of.
Was it an actual accident or was it incompetence?
What's the difference?
Well, right.
I don't know, because that well goes all the way back to, I think that well was drilled before I was on the FinCom.
I was on the Board of Health.
Right.
Okay.
But it was before we had a DPW, we had the Board of Water Commissioners. Believe me, it was a long, it was one of those things where you're banging your head against the wall saying, this is what makes government look really dumb. Even if it was an accident, it's like, it just looks really dumb that you've drilled a well and now you can't actually access the well because it's on property we don't own. So so it's since been resolved, but I just want to make that explicit as we go forward to identify sources that we have access to, so we don't sink a well that we can't get water from. So. Yeah,
and I think the description, in the quote, again, I said I felt comfortable with the way that it was sort of worded in there, and the intent of that. I think the shelf life, certainly to Michelle's point, if it is a piece of land that sort of moves, that needs to go in the conversation when it comes to the asset management part, where we're talking about making sure our maps are up to date and all of that everything in the ground is sort of being able to be planned accordingly. I think 10 years is certainly a shelf life on that.
Okay, any other discussion on Article 9? If not, then I will entertain a motion. If somebody wants to make a motion for favorable action, it would be that we recommend that the town appropriate $75,000 from water retained earnings for the purpose stated in the article.
So moved.
Second. Finn Murphy.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? Okay, let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
I'm going to say yes, but still pending discussions with all other interested parties in town before we actually do any real work.
What was the last part of that? Pending discussion?
Pending discussion. It's just, I just want to make sure that before we go and spend, whatever, 60 million on pipes or speed up things and do it through debt, that we, make sure that that's what the town wants over, say, a new high school or whatever. Yeah,
well, that's obviously, and just to be clear, right, that to me is only one aspect of this work, right?
But,
so,
no, I get it. They've expanded it more so from what it was, and that's why another reason why I'll support it. But anyway.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Whitaker.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Ms. Zemer.
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell.
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian.
Yep.
Okay, and I vote yes. Okay, so we have a recommendation for Article 9. Okay, now comes the fun, which is the water main replacement. This one is just I'll just give the 2-second blurb, which is every October we approve the next water main project from the infrastructure fee, and this is the one that's next, which is Winter Street. What?
2 years of the water infrastructure fee. Did we not do a project last year?
No, we did one last year. They did Mudville last year.
But I thought we were raising like $1.5 million a year or something like that from the water infrastructure fee.
That's a good, well,
May have been it may have been a May one though.
Yeah, but my point is, this is like twice as much as we are slated to raise from the $300 fee.
well, I guess the question is, what is the balance in the water infrastructure fee account, Travis?
Right, so that would be 2.9. So this is sort of tapping the full balance.
So we've been underspending a little bit, probably. Maybe it's more like we've been underspending a little bit each year. And
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
And I would also say, and I highlighted it in the write-up on the article, but this is averaging like based on market, 1.4 million. So the design engineer on this one is done. The 1.4 million per mile is an increase in the market, so that's unfortunate, right? We could assume a couple years ago about $1 million a mile. 1.4 is not in our favor.
Now for this, have we? I presume, I would hope that in this 2.8 million, it's been contemplated that Winter Street is a nightmare.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean,
just from because I'm saying like that's a street you could look at and say this is going to cost us more, right?
Yeah. So and this came up. This is a question that came up. I forget what venue. I've been speaking about this one for a while. So when we open the road, or now that it's through design engineer, essentially once this project gets through town meeting, if it's appropriated, DPW would essentially send out feelers to all utilities, essentially saying this road is going to be open. Here's your window of opportunity to approach us to do something. You want to put in gas, you want to put electric wires underground. That's another sort, they get the opportunity. Once we do this project and we seal it up, there's a 5-year moratorium where the only time you're getting in this road is if it's an emergency. So that, it's unclear right now exactly what will happen, but that once it's approved, if it's approved by town meeting, that's the next step for the DPW. But they do, the design engineering at 2.8 is based on current numbers.
Okay. Okay. If everybody's,
I have a question.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Let's say they decide to put gas on the street. I'm knocking on wood here. Then does National Grid or whoever it is, I don't know because I don't have a bill from them because I don't have gas. Do they pay for part of then the paving, or how does that work? Do they contribute any of the cost of the work?
Generally, when we open the road, they're sort of getting in there. We're giving them the opportunity as a service to residents. I can't imagine if they were to delay us on any timelines, we could certainly be working with them. If they were doing work that was not related to our work, they would be the ones paying the details, that kind of thing. If there were an opportunity for them to contribute, I certainly would pursue that. But I think if they're not holding us up, generally speaking, that's not the case.
Okay, so there's no incentive to the town or any benefit to the town.
Well, we want, obviously, to make sure that they're doing any infrastructure so that they're not opening a road that at the end of this is nicely paved and we would like to have a long, useful life of.
Okay. Thank you.
You should go and ask all your resident neighbors and see if they can put in gas line for their, get a petition going, having them.
I will.
Just comment, you have, Travis, you wrote water infrastructure free fund. I think you meant fee fund.
Yeah, it's not free.
I was all excited.
I will correct that.
See, free cash, free fund. There you
Yeah.
go. Too much free stuff. Yeah. Okay, is that what you want? Is that why you raised your hand, Ben? Just want to make sure.
Yes, that was all. Just a little ticky-tacky.
Okay, so any other questions on the water main replacement? If not, then the motion we want to read that we recommend that the town appropriate $2,800,000 from the water infrastructure fee account for the purpose stated in the article.
Move. So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on this one? Hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Ziemer.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian,
Yes.
and I vote yes. And just for the record, you're abstaining because you live on Winter Street, correct? Okay. Just want to make sure that it wasn't just point out the conflict so that people didn't think there was you were secretly running a water pipe replacement company or something. So, yeah. Okay. Let's see, 11. Okay, so now we've had a little discussion about this. One of the things we discussed, and to my point earlier about coming back for more money, this is a good example of that, where we approved the 8.3 million borrowing that included a contingency, that included design engineering services, that we end up paying cash for a few years ago. And then the project came back, and there was this issue of increasing the borrowing authority. We had a meeting, several of us attended with Travis to discuss with Sean and the engineers involved, the company involved in the design planning, about the reason for the change in cost. And Travis can provide more detail there. But I will say that one of my concerns was that when the DOR sent us the request, the new guidelines for certifying the tax rate, one of the suggestions I made to Travis was, rather than increasing the borrowing authority, that we could put some of these funds towards this, keep the borrowing authority where it is. This would cover the new cost estimate. And the advantage of this would be, by doing it this way, we're looking for the SRF funding, which is the state low interest loan, and that takes time. So by appropriating it this way and putting the additional money towards it now, that A, we don't require an increase in borrowing authority, and B, it buys us more time so the project can move forward while we're waiting for the SRF application to come through, so that if it gets approved, we can get the borrowing we do have to do for this will be at a lower interest rate. So that's just the background. Travis can provide any further. If you have anything to add to that, Travis, feel free to do that.
No, I think this town has sort of appropriated all free cash as a practice policy. I think where we are with free cash from last year, obviously a lot of it's related to sort of revenues above assumption from last year, but this is a good use. It gives us some flexibility. We have the application into the SRF for the original 8.375. The design engineering is going through the appropriation for the 600,000 out of water retained earnings from the town meeting that followed the original appropriation. And this would give us essentially the ability to bid out the project, stay on the most aggressive timeline that we can, have cash flow. If the SRF is going to take forever, and I shared this with Ken, I've dealt with the SRF quite a bit in my time. They just sometimes they don't move at the pace you want to move, and when we're on a tight schedule, there may be an opportunity. I mean, there may be a time when we decide as a town, look, we'll just go to the market ourselves. We won't go through the SRF, but this gives us the most amount of time to let them sort of get their act together. They piece together a number of different communities all at once. That's kind of their process and why it can take some time. So I think it does make sense. Talked about that with Mary and Sharon. And then the engineer update, I think, was to Michelle, Ken, Vin, Ben, Sparrow on the select board, and myself. And I think people were sort of comfortable with where he is. But if there's anything else that I could answer, I can certainly do that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on that?
Yes, I do. Vin Murphy here. Question. I thought we were just going to request raising the debt as opposed to using $850,000 for the free cash. We're just going to increase the borrowing authority, and it was going to go from retained earnings. Isn't that what we bandied about?
Well, the increase in borrowing authority wouldn't come from anywhere, right? Because I would just say we could borrow more when the time came.
Yep.
Right. We did talk about that at the time, but then, as I said, with the DOR's revised guidance, that gave us the ability to move in this direction.
Okay.
And that's really what it's down to.
Okay.
So.
That's
So
what
we just figured, and in discussing with Travis, as he pointed out, it gives us better flexibility with giving us time to wait out the SRF. So,
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on this one? Okay, if not, then I'll entertain a motion that we recommend that the town appropriate $850,000 from free cash for the purpose stated in the article.
So moved. Vin Murphy. Making that.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on our recommendation for Article 11? Okay, proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred?
Aye.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yep.
And I vote yes. Okay, we have a recommendation for Article 11. Okay, 12 is stormwater management. Okay, and this one we've discussed before, right? We have to do this. And do you want to say anything on this, Travis?
No, I think a question that sort of come up and I think would be on the 22 timeline is, you know, at some point when we're doing all these design engineering, does it make sense to have a conversation about an engineer for the town? I certainly don't want to do that on the fly. There's certain ones where you look at it and you say, well, this is not something, even if we had a town engineer, that they could do in certain instances. This is one I think we could reasonably say a good portion of this money could be accomplished if we had the services in-house. And so I think it plays into the equation. But again, that's a longer term conversation. Other than that, again, it's keeping us up to date with the MS4 permit.
Okay. Okay, any discussion on this? If there is none, then I'd entertain a motion that we appropriate $93,200 from free cash for the purpose stated in the article.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on this one?
I'm sorry, I think you said 93.2 and it's 92.3 that I have. Did I write
Okay,
it?
well, I'm reading what you wrote,
Yes.
what you sent us.
All right,
So, okay,
I'll transpose the number, so
okay. So correct the motion to say 92.3. I guess, does that still want to be moved by Tim?
As
I think you
amended.
were the one that moved it, right? Yes.
As amended. Absolutely.
Okay.
Second.
Okay,
I'm better in Excel spreadsheets than Word documents, apparently.
that's fine. I'm just saying, I'm reading it right from what, I mean, I have the other thing, but I only have one
Just
visible. at
saved
a
us
time.
money. We can move on. He saved us
Yes.
money.
Right. Okay, so let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred,
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, we have a recommendation for that. Okay, Article 13, which is Green Street. We talked about this at a prior meeting. You know, I guess what we could do, well, first, any questions on this? I'm not going to bother. We all know what this is for. Does anybody have any comments? Okay. If not, then I guess we can go for the motion. I will say for the record, since we have a select board member present, you know, as I've kind of mentioned in the past, there is the original intent of, or the select board, when they voted to take this property, one of the intents was to look at returning it to the tax rolls, right? Was to get it back onto the tax rolls. So I would hope that we do we have to do this work. We know we have to do some of this work, but at the same time that we would not just be so fixated on taking it off the tax rolls and turning it into a parking lot that we don't evaluate that option. So Ms. Hine, go ahead.
Yeah, I just would update you that I talked to Ralph Tella, the LSP, who's helping us with the project. We went over, I know this is a question or a concern that you have, Ken, and probably the rest of the finance committee as well. So I raised it with him. I think there's still work to be done to answer that question that you have. So I'm well aware of it and trying to gather the information to, you know, be able to address that concern as to how feasible it is that it returns to the tax rolls, whether or not that's the best reuse of it, and what are the challenges if that were to be the path that we take to pursue.
Yeah. Well, I just want to make sure, you know, as I said, in all the emails I've seen, it's been kind of one directional about, you know, the town doing something with it. And I just want to make sure that is not kind of discounted. So I'm glad to hear that you're looking into it. So,
Yep.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, then the motion, and is it 54-9, Travis? I'll double check now before I.
It is, yeah.
Okay. Then I'll say the motion would want to be that we recommend that the town appropriate $54,900 from free cash for the purpose stated in the article.
I make a motion.
Second.
No,
Go ahead. It's fine. I don't.
I don't care.
Okay. Any further discussion on that motion? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred,
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So we have a recommendation for that. And as I said, I go in the same order every time, so you guys should be able to unmute faster now. Okay, Article 14, which is the signs and equipment, the request from the Traffic Advisory Committee. There's detail on this one in the capital article, I believe. Did you have that in there?
This would have been one of the ones I sent previously.
Yeah, I know we saw stuff on this. I just want to make sure. So which one is that in, Travis? Because I know there's a bunch of stuff in there. That's why I want to make sure that everybody sees the breakdown. List of articles, let's see. Capital article. See, I'm just trying to think because it was, didn't you have it in the capital article? That's why I said I thought it was in the material you sent out before.
Yes, it was. I had sent the whole packet in a previous email. Let me just see. I can resend it right now if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be nice. I just want to make sure everybody, because as I said, there's there's a bunch of things in that breakdown that I think the committee should.
All right, I'm sending you the one from 10/20. I believe that's when I would have sent it. Tag. All right, so I will send that to the Finance Committee right now. And while it comes across the Ethernet, I will, I'll just sort of give the breakdown. So there are essentially 4 components. All of this is going to be sort of leading into, and the question came up where these would be housed. And I think, because there's a sort of data component that's going to impact sort of, traffic decisions and those types of things, that police probably would be the space that this would be housed. That was discussed with the police chief. Obviously, the request comes from the group that houses that includes a select board member, a number of residents, but then also the police chief, the fire chief, the DPW director. And so there's also some software components here related to sort of the data collection and how we can use that to make smarter decisions with traffic. Then there's also signs itself, which is a lot of, this is sort of referencing the TAC is up and running now. They're sort of hearing from residents, and a number of these are to do with, improving of signs, increasing the use of signs. In some instances, obviously, the point was made by the capital subcommittee. We don't want signs on every post and tree throughout town, but it's...
And I'll just interject there and say there's a sign that was just put on the corner of Central and 16 that seems to be incredibly non-useful. That's a perfect example of what I was talking about of when we were talking to the subcommittee about signing the place up. It's a sign that's completely and utterly useless that's now taking up part of the sidewalk.
Okay. So, you want to send me details on that separately, I can take a look. So, but the idea being, a lot of these requests that are, if somebody, like for example, one of them was we're essentially a dead end street. We have trucks coming down here, and it would be really nice if people knew that it was not a through street. It's like, well, that's certainly a request that TAC should be able to accommodate. One thing, is obviously through the DPW budget, there is a sign budget. It's about $1,000. And it is really to replace worn and broken signs. We could certainly look in the future if we want to have that operationally. This allows TAC to sort of be responding to some of the sign requests. And then this is all equipment that they feel would be very helpful to their mission. And I try to provide that back up here.
Okay, Sue?
So, Travis, do you know with the electronic message board that we currently have that we often see out in front of town hall, whether that has a trailer for it?
So that can be trailered. Actually, it was just moved out to the Sherburne line on 16, where we're going to have a detour, FYI, anybody watching, come next Monday. And so that does have a trailer, if that's the question, yeah?
Yeah, so I was wondering is since we already have a trailer, why do we need a second trailer? And couldn't we just use the one?
So generally speaking, I believe the trailer goes out and the trailer itself, the hitch is left there, but I can get an answer to that question.
And do we expect to use two in separate locations? Like often we see the sign around in and around town hall, but most of the time, I'm not saying all the time because obviously it's not there now, but is the expectation that these would be used all around town, or one would be sort of town hall and then the other one would be carted around? And then could we, just given the trailer's 22,000, could we live without, having two trailers and just live with the one and move the current one around and keep the other one static?
Yeah, my only point on the deployment is one aspect of this, right? What we want to see, especially right now, we're pursuing a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion on Woodland Street. What we want to be able to do is make sure that we're watching for all impacts of decisions like that are made. And so having multiple counters in different spots is important. It looks like Tina's raised her hand, so I'm sure she has the TAC she's a member of.
So go ahead, Tina, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, sure. So Sue, one of the issues that we have with the message board trailers is that there's competition, or there's competing needs with DPW as well as Board of Health. I think that's been raised before by Travis as, again, one of the issues. I spoke with Chief Stone this morning, unrelated, but it came up. The traffic safety unit that he is looking to develop to address many of the concerns we have in the town relies on driver education as much as enforcement. He feels that driver education is a key part of improving traffic conditions so that we're not just writing tickets. So the message board becomes a critical tool for that. So if we have competing interests from Board of Health and DPW for message boards, then we have less ability to use them for education for driver behavior changes. So I think, to the extent that we know the need is there with Board of Health, we know the need is there for DPW, to have Chief Stone, Chief Cassidy, the entire TAC committee make this recommendation, it points to the need for another message board in my mind. So
I actually wasn't asking about the board, the board itself, Tina. I was actually asking about the trailer. And just given that we have a trailer already, and most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time we see the sign being used currently in and around town hall. And so could we get away with perhaps not having a second trailer, given it's 22,000? I definitely understand the need for the second signboard. I was just trying to see if maybe we could either postpone or get, not have to incur the 22,000.
Okay, I don't know them to be separate. That's the thing. So I'm just looking.
Yeah, I mean,
separately. Chief Cassidy, do you have a stance on that? Otherwise, I would probably ask Chief Stone to come to this group next week and sort of answer to the need specific to the trailer itself.
Or even just finding it out, and maybe before Thursday, Travis, because I know we'll talk on Thursday.
Page 3 of the documents that he just sent out.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
Our existing variable message signboards, the signboard is integrated into the trailer. It's not something that you trailer to the location and then offload it and deploy it and display it. The variable message signboards we have right now are connected to the frame, which has the tires which go over the road. It doesn't separate.
Okay. It's just bifurcated in the cost here.
Right. So in other words, they just do that to charge you more by saying
it's yeah, unbundle.
As opposed to like along the highway, there are variable message signboards that are permanently mounted.
Right. That's what I was thinking, that maybe you didn't need the trailer to move it around. So that's what I was hoping. Okay. That's fine.
If we separated it from the trailer, there would be no way for us to have it in a position so the community could see.
That's helpful. My other question, and maybe it's in here, is just on, and I would just echo what Ken said, because I actually drove through town the other day and saw the sign that how far it is to the schools, et cetera, that you can get on Google Map. And so the 30 traffic signs, the dead end street that you just noted, Travis, I think I'm absolutely on board with, but how many of those 30 are signs that are critical versus nice to have sign that we now have on Central Street.
Okay, I'm guessing Tina wants to answer that. So go ahead, Tina.
Well, so, okay, I mean, I think whether or not it's useful is up to the individual more so than any board or committee, but I will point out that the signs that are posted right now, the one particularly you're referring to in downtown Holliston is part of a pilot, a pilot grant award that we got through Shared Streets and Spaces. There's a link on the town website where we're collecting survey data for people who have comments on this pilot. So if you don't like the downtown sign, I strongly recommend anyone listening, including the members of the finance committee, to go ahead and fill out the survey and say, that's a useless sign. I don't like it. It crowds the space and creates signage clutter, and I want it gone. We're collecting all of that feedback. These are temporary piloted changes, and feedback's critical.
That's helpful. So I'm more concerned about the financial aspect of putting up signs that you can find the information out really quickly otherwise.
Yeah,
so the signs that we're talking about here, which is the question I was asking, the 30 signs, those are critical signs for town, not signs about directions to whatever the school.
Correct,
I
yeah.
know there was other things on the sign. I didn't have a red light, fortunately, so I only caught a part of it, but these are like dead ends, stop signs, things like that.
Yeah, and the sign, by the way, in downtown is meant for people walking and biking. But anyway, yeah, no, what the traffic advisory committee will be hearing are petitions from residents that have much more to do with safety and alerting drivers and so on, and would not be wayfinding, no.
Okay, thank you.
And just go ahead, Mr. Murphy, you had your hand up. Go first.
Just have a question. Why are we adding radar to this sign? It's $1,200 for the radar option. If we already, in addition, we're buying a radar sign. It's $22,650, and then if you look at the detail, which I appreciate you attaching, but $1,200 for radar option enables your speed message.
Yeah, I think that's generally a function that, as we're sort of as a component to slow down traffic is generally used. Again, I think Chief Stone would be the one I would point to. Is Tina's hand raised for this one?
Of course it is. Yes. Go ahead, Tina.
Thank you for letting me speak. Yeah, so then there are two types of radar that we're looking for, serving two specifically different purposes. So in terms of the messaging board, it's to alert the driver in the moment that they are going this speed. You need the radar to do that. The second type of radar is to collect data, sort of stealth radar, the number of cars passing by, how fast are they going, so that when we have a petitioner say, cars are going really, really fast on my street, we can say, well, yes, they are. No, they aren't. They're actually going the speed limit. So two different purposes, two different uses of radar.
Okay.
Other Vin.
Okay, Mr. Maxwell.
So it was a little while ago. I think it's on here. Part of this also includes a web, a data server, software. Did somebody check in with Chris just to make sure this is going to work within our current infrastructure?
Yeah, we look good with that. Again, the data would be housed with the police. So Chris works with the police quite a bit. No major concerns there. The issue again was sort of the accommodating the cost of the software through 3 years. So us all understanding that if we'd like to continue this after 3 years, that will be built into the budget. The question that came up from the capital subcommittee is where would that lay? Would that be the IT department, the police department? Again, based on sort of the information that I started with and Tina just mentioned, I think probably with the police budget 3 years from now, but just so that everybody sort of understands the scope, we'd like to know when the costs sort of go beyond the capital expenditure. And that I checked in with the accountant just to make sure, generally speaking, that we can accommodate that. The 3 years worth of software through this article, we feel comfortable with as well.
Do you know offhand what the cost is that we'll end up having to re-up in 3 years for?
I do have that. Hold on one second. It's $1,450 in FY24. I have assumed for the electronic messaging signboard trailer.
Okay. Will that include any new versions, or would we have to pay separate for new versions? Is that just a license, or does that include a rev of the software?
So I think within the 3 years, it's all sort of inclusive, and we would have to, deal with that as we go into the 4th year.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't. Generally speaking, I can't really enter into agreements that go beyond 3 years in municipal government.
Absolutely.
And to do so, I need town meeting approval. So those aren't the ones that we generally do anyway. But yeah, I can't give you a guarantee, I guess.
I'm just curious if there were details, but thank you.
Now, the other thing I wanted to point out just for and obviously Tina's hand will go up if I misstate this, but on the 30 signs, I don't believe that's signs that they have predetermined they want to place. I think that's just they want to have money to fund signs when they deem signs are necessary. So it shouldn't be read as they're going to put up 30 signs in town. It should be read as they will have a budget to support 30 signs if they feel they're necessary. So.
Do we have an idea of how many signs per year typically go up?
I don't have a clue about that. I don't know if Tina does. Go ahead, Mr. Cassidy, Chief Cassidy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also point out that one of the reasons that we were looking, as I'm speaking as a member of TAC, is that it would be done in this format as opposed to a budget adjustment, is that it would allow the TAC to have availability to offer up signs to residents who go through the proper process over a course of more than 1 year. So that's to your point, Sue, of how many per year. We don't know. The TAC is in its infancy. The first 3 petitioners that we heard all were requesting signs. So a lot of it's going to depend on the nature of the applications that we receive.
Had we just not done signs in the past, or how did that all work before TAC was initiated?
As I believe Mr. Ahern mentioned earlier, sign replacement is really the only thing that's been covered in the DPW budget. So any new signs that were identified, there really wasn't a mechanism for people to request those. And so it had to be within the existing appropriation.
They'd go to the town administrator and complain. That's what they would do. And then it would go to the select board. But the other thing, it just, the comment I'd make about the signs also is I hope and I expect that the members of the TAC weigh both sides equally, right? There's the public safety mission of putting up a sign, but there's also we don't want to have a town full of signs aspect of it too. So, I hope and I don't think it's going to be this way, and I don't think it has been this way, but I'm hoping that they don't look at it as though any resident that comes along and says, I want a sign on my street, that they say, okay, we'll appease the resident, right? Sometimes it's, if the sign doesn't make sense, or if the sign makes sense but is not necessary, that they would say, thank you, but no thank you. All right, we're not going to put something there. But again, that's their business. But I expect, I wouldn't be happy if we had a board that just started putting up signs every time somebody wanted one. So, okay. So any further discussion on this one?
I'm just going to say that, I'm looking at all these requests and all the money that we're spending, and this to me seems like one of the lower priority ones. So, I just spent a lot of money on, I don't know.
Well,
I'm just gonna vote against it because it feels like this is not the highest priority of all the things that we're looking at tonight.
Right, but presumably the other thing I'd say about this is this is a relatively one-time expense, right? I wouldn't expect to see another request for 2 more trailers and radars and things like that, and even the 30 signs presumably will last them quite a while, because I wouldn't expect them to go through 30 signs in a year.
Oh, I bet we'll go through 30 signs in about 3 months.
Agree. And
I think we're going to keep the aluminum and steel industry, humming with all the signs that are going to go up in town.
And the signs are electronic. There's a useful life that's on them, and
Well, correct. There will be a useful life to them, but I don't think that useful life is 2 years, or I think it's we're looking at many years. So, I mean,
we hope.
All right, well,
okay, so if it depends, what if people want, if we want to proceed with this one, then the motion would be that we recommend that the town appropriate $52,500 from free cash for the purpose stated in the article.
I make that motion.
Second. Okay. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, proceed to vote. Mr. Alfred?
no.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
Yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian.
Yep,
What was that? Was that a yes or no?
that's a yes.
Okay, I couldn't tell. And I will vote yes on that. So that is approved. Okay, we're slowly getting to the end here. Okay, the traffic engineering studies. Mr. Ahern, do you want to give us a quick summary on that one? I think we already know, but I know you made changes to that, so I just wanted to.
Yeah, so if you read the narrative, I just wanted to make sure everybody, I think the version I had sent previously sort of said traffic studies specifically, and I kind of gave the backup of how I came to the number. This is related to a lot of issues that we have on the bookends of town of 16, essentially, Lowland Industrial Park, Hopping Brook Industrial Park, but I mean other areas as well. One of the things that we're able to pursue right now after sort of going through the conversation on Lowland Industrial Park is a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion for Woodland Street as it comes out to 16. We're able to do that because we have counts on Woodland Street that shows a certain number of heavy commercial vehicles through the course of a day within a certain periods that was done by a traffic engineer. Shows that we have significant use of that particular street with heavy commercial vehicles. To pursue any sort of traffic calming for commercial vehicles specifically, you need that type of data. There were requests in other areas of town to sort of see if that is a need on other streets as well. I think I mentioned previously, when we do those things, we want to be able to track it, and that's a lot of the component of the TAC article that you all just supported. This study, I think, this article sort of allows us to address a couple things. One, to if we think it is the right choice to pursue heavy commercial vehicle exclusions on any street. South Street on the Hopping Brook side is one that has been a significant concern that I've been hearing about since I came to town. But then on the Lowland Industrial Park as well, the concern is essentially the hoops that we jump through to pursue any of these, if we think it's the right thing, requires a substantial amount of data that we would provide to Mass DOT. So I'm currently in the process with Mass DOT on Woodland Street's heavy commercial vehicle exclusion application. Again, I had all the data because a study had been done through the planning board. A number of occasions we get traffic counts because the planning board makes these developers essentially do them and provide them as they're, sort of having an impact study. In an area like Lowland, it's less likely that we have them because, the developers, the residents, or excuse me, the business have been there so long that they don't really come for special permits and then sort of get forced to do these things that we use for our benefit, like traffic counts. So this gives us the flexibility to sort of do them ourselves, approach a traffic engineering study. They're about, I would estimate, $6,600 per time that we do a traffic count that we can use for this type of purpose or any type of purpose. And then the other issue that has been coming up quite a bit is people having issues with sound as it relates to either the industrial parks or trucks, specifically when it comes to jake braking and those types of things in residential areas. To pursue any type of noise ordinance, and this is something I believe I put in the backup previously, but the outgoing building inspector had sort of gone down this path to sort of see how do you enforce noise ordinances? How is it done in other towns? The answer is essentially you need a sound engineer. If you're going to end up in court with anybody on noise at any point, you're going to get thrown out unless you have noise, a sound engineer. So in a couple instances, we've been hearing quite a bit about the noise as it relates to the industrial parks, and then also specifically as it relates to heavy commercial vehicles, jake braking, and those types of issues in neighborhoods. So this would allow us to sort of address both of those, and that's the purpose.
Okay, so just to be clear, is this so the $40,000 is almost, it sounds like it's almost like a pool of funds to provide for these studies, or is this to cover specific studies that right now you need that are needed?
So based on the requests in the Lowland Industrial Park area from residents, I think we could probably justify 3 to 4 studies on specific streets. I would try to loop them as many streets as possible into a study. But yes, this would cover more than one. The sound engineering, I think, is something that we want to be prepared for. I need the new building inspector essentially to read himself in on where Chris Caney was when he left on the same issues that Chris was dealing with when it comes to sound. But this would essentially allow him as well as needed. And when the calls are to address sound, noise ordinance issues, to have this at his ready. So I would say it addresses specific issues where we know we need counts right now. And it also sort of allows us to address issues as they come up in the future.
Okay, Ms. Nersessian.
Yeah, I guess I'm not so keen. So I'm very keen on addressing the Lowland issue, and I understand that that's a problem. But I think I heard you say, Travis, that was about 6,600. I think for the rest, we should defer because there's a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot. I have to be honest. There's a lot more than I would have expected, just again, given the economic uncertainty and where it's not sort of designated for particular things that can be acted on immediately. My recommendation would be just Lowland and then address everything else going forward when we know more.
Okay, I see Tina's got her hand up, so I'm guessing she wants to answer that. Go ahead, Tina.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I would just point out that the Lowland Industrial Park is to address a longer standing issue. Although there are new projects that are proposed for the industrial park where we're looking for traffic study information. There are other projects that are presented at other industrial parks and other locations in town that have significant traffic implications. So to address known issues after they've been identified and become problematic would be, in my mind, too reactive. And this article positions the town to be able to gather information so that we can be proactive. I think we're all aware of the developing conversation around 555 Hopping Brook. And at this point in time, the town's needing information so that we can, the planning board, the zoning board, the select board can make the best decisions, whatever they may be. And a lot of that is dependent upon traffic information, which we just simply don't have. So I would propose that we take a more proactive look, knowing that a lot of these industrial and commercial developments require us to have a knowledge and understanding and the data on certain traffic conditions so that we can best advocate for the best interests of the town.
But Travis noted that for many of the places, we actually do have the data. He did note for Lowland that he didn't think that we did. And I do think we should find out. But I guess I would ask is in the other areas, whether or not we actually do have data or not.
I can speak to that. We have data presented by the traffic studies performed by the project developer. The person proposing the project often does a traffic study, but those traffic studies are for the benefit of the developer, not for the town.
Well, they're multi-beneficial, but yeah, I agree. I'm just saying there's a lot in here, Tina. Honestly, this is taking money from free cash that could be used otherwise. We have a lot of people out of work, a lot of people that, we're continuing to see escalating COVID cases. I just personally, again, for the town, I'm very concerned that this is a lot of spend here that we have listed in this warrant. A lot more than what we normally see.
Of money that we're spending on, and it's all going into the same type of thing. And I just think that we should be prioritizing some of this stuff a little bit more. We're not trying to do it all at once.
Right. I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying let's do the priority first, and then bring it back up in the spring.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, it's frustrating to hear just because I think that a significant amount of time and energy and effort has gone into prioritizing these. I think I speak for myself, and you may disagree with me, and that's okay. But from where I sit, these are the priorities of the town based on the hard work that's been done, certainly since Travis Ahern has joined us through many of his efforts. But long before that, I would say these are significant priorities that the select board has been focusing an enormous amount of time and energy and public comment on. And so, again, I'm not going to convince anybody to feel differently. I'm just putting out my opinion on this. I believe.
But Tina, it is an insane amount of priorities. Maybe this select board hasn't prioritized enough of what it wants. And if you want to go back and you want to reprioritize if we've already voted on something that actually you would rather this study over something else, then let us know. But just because you spent a lot of time and you feel like it's been prioritized, that doesn't necessarily mean like it's money that we should be spending all of it at once in the environment that we're in.
Sure. I hear what you're saying, and I think this is agree to disagree. I again will reiterate that I believe these do represent the priorities of the select board.
But this isn't a disagreement. This is. I mean, I'm not disputing the fact that it's that it's priorities of the select board. I'm simply just saying that it's, my priority may be to go and buy a $2 million house, but if I can't afford a $2 million house, it doesn't mean that my priority of my $2 million house doesn't matter.
Fair enough. Yeah. So to come back to Sue's question about, what the traffic study, what this engineering study represents, I think it does position the town to be proactive with traffic concerns that we will reasonably and likely should anticipate from proposed.
Which is the low end part of this again? 10,000?
I'm sorry?
I think that Travis said 6,600 for the lowland, which is what I would propose that we approve.
I would agree with you there.
I would, just to be clear, I wanted to find out when I asked the question to begin with, my question was for this things we know we want to do, right? This is a pool. This is kind of like we just talked about with the signs, right? It's a pool of money being put aside to accomplish a specific thing. And my question to your points was, it seems like $40,000 is more than we need for the things we know we want to study. So what is the amount for the things we know we want to study? If that's only, $20,000, let's do 20,000. Good, Travis.
Would you be comfortable if I sort of put together exactly what 40,000 would get us right now, and we can have a conversation next week?
Yes, I think that would be a good thing because that's to the points that have been made, right? We want to understand, we independent of this article, we're generally not in the habit of setting aside pools of money, right?
No, and I understand.
So in some cases we're okay with that because we realize like the signage and things like that. But in something like this, as I said, it seems like this is a pool of money, and given the situation, it would be better to target it towards what we need right now.
No, and I think, as I'm hearing Sue and Dan's points, and yours as well, they're all very valid. And I would say that, in my mind, it wasn't an issue because the list of things that we would be addressing through this is probably larger than 40, and we would have to prioritize within that to not go over, right? So in my mind, I'm approaching it from a completely different perspective, but I'm understanding that was sort of, that was an approach issue on my part.
But it's not just this, Travis. It's the whole. I'm just looking at all the aspects in totality. But it's not.
But just within this scope, I understand your point. But within this scope, right? If I list out the sort of areas where I think we could use data, specifically counts, because we know we have issues in the Lowland Industrial Park, and the 6,600 is per traffic count. That's how I came to the 40,000. The sound engineering is sort of a $3,000 to $5,000 range, depending on the scope of work and whether or not they end up in court, kind of thing. I don't think, I think there's one or two where it's an issue that has carried from the previous building inspector and is getting handed to the new building inspector. So I'd want to just put those incidents, but also not. I don't want to write them into the article, but I want you to be comfortable with understanding what the intent is and where these would be focused. So I will bring that to you next week.
And are those all done simultaneously, or do they have to be done one after the other? Like, do you hire one company to do them and they do them sort of one at a time, or how does it work and how long do they take?
So generally, I think we've all driven over, there's a couple different ways to do it, but I think we've all driven over those thin black strips across the road. There's two and it hits and counts. So that's the traffic count. That's the most basic one to do. Generally speaking, they're going to put them in two areas to sort of make sure they understand where traffic is flowing. They can categorize what size vehicle went over, give us all that data, which goes to Mass DOT in the long run if we choose to pursue something. Can we do that in multiple areas all at once if it's more cost effective? Certainly. But the idea is, I think South Street right now would be one on the opposite end of Lowland Industrial Park. That is also a significant issue, whether 555 goes in or not. And I would not probably be able to time that with Lowland to sort of to recognize savings. But if I put together this list and bring it back to you, I think, we can have that conversation.
And in the study, sorry to be sort of dopey about this, but in the prior article, we had a traffic counter too. that's different than these things across the, like, couldn't we just reuse that traffic counter and do the traffic study ourselves?
So the traffic data that we're going to get will give us sort of size of vehicles. It will not. It is not the equipment used by a traffic engineer, right? Who's going to put a stamp on something saying here are the official counts that you're presenting to Mass DOT. The reason I think those are going to be vital, especially if we are going to pursue a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion or sort of impacting truck traffic in anywhere, is that we are now going to want the HPD to be able to sort of monitor before and after traffic patterns to make sure that we understand the impacts of these decisions and be tracking that for our own purposes and to make decisions for the town that are in the best interest of the town. But they do not necessarily provide what Mass DOT would require for us to get something passed by them.
It's a certification that they need. Got it. Okay.
And so one thing that I ran into when I was researching specifically how Lowland has come to be when it came to heavy commercial vehicle exclusions is that 3 have been passed in the town of Holliston previously. One of them was done correctly through Mass DOT and was actually approved, and the other are just on paper, right? So part of this is making sure that we go through the proper course of action to make sure that these things stick in the long run, if that's what the town wants.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, Ms. Ziemer.
When a traffic study is done, does it look at the impact of excluding traffic from one road, what it does to other roads?
So
I mean, like if traffic isn't going down South Street, then where is it going?
Right, and so we would want that from the traffic engineer, and that would sort of be within the what we would expect is a deliverable from them, including it in the counts. Can it predict everything? Absolutely not, right? That's why we want to be able to track with the equipment that we're talking about through TAC, the actual impacts, have our own people sort of making sure we understand where traffic has been dispersed to. I think that is sort of one of the biggest concerns when we do any of these things, is to understand where the traffic is going to go when we're excluding it for one road. When you pursue a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion with Mass DOT, you need to provide them with a reasonable alternate route that the truck is going to travel. But in reality, the truck is going to travel wherever the GPS tells them once they see a sign that says they can't go one way, right? So with that to the TAC article, we want to be able to sort of make sure that we're tracking any impacts of decisions that we're making. When it comes to getting approval for any of those decisions, if we think it's in the best interest of the town, that's where we need certified traffic counts, and that's where this article sort of differs.
Okay, because every day I make a left turn off of Ashland Street onto Concord Street. I've been doing that for 10 years, and traffic has increased like 50%, just traffic in general. So, I mean, it isn't because of a street being closed or anything. It's just that's the way, there's just more traffic in general. So if you're going to decrease a route traffic is going to take, on another road, traffic is going to be increasing, because that's just, I don't know if it's a law, Ken, is that a law of physics or a law of, it's a law of something. The traffic's got to go somewhere.
Traffic finds the path of least resistance.
Right. So if you close one road, it's going to be somewhere else. And I don't want to help my neighbors in one area only to harm my neighbors in another area.
Absolutely.
So Travis, I think that we'll need to drill into this a little more and identify what's actually needed for the current issues.
Absolutely. I'll bring that back next week.
Okay. And well, the good news is if we're deferring on that one for today, then that's pretty much it, because I don't think we care about the road acceptance. The surplus equipment article is going away because we passed that in July, which I thought we had, but then couldn't find it, and then Travis found it, so we're good on that one. And there's a placeholder in the current version for an easement, but that is just, at the moment, that is just a placeholder while there's discussion ongoing. So if nothing happens there, we won't need to do anything. But if something does happen, then we'll need to revisit that next week. But it doesn't sound like anything's happening there. So, okay. So does anybody have any further comments, feedback, or anything? That's our first pass through everything. Everybody tired? Because, okay. Okay, so let me just briefly go over what the plan is. I mean, Travis, do you have anything else you wanted to say tonight, or are you good for tonight?
No, so obviously next week we have select board Monday night. So the capital subcommittee is this Thursday. I do have a slight conflict, but I should be able to join you after that. So if you need anything, Tim, please let me know leading into that. So the select board Monday night, your group Tuesday night, I think, Ken and I have discussed slightly, sort of the process of documentation and all of that moving forward. But at this point, I think, there's some pieces of information that have been asked tonight that I'll bring back next week. But otherwise, if there's anything you need, just sort of reach out in between now and then.
Okay. So as I was going to say, the plan for us going forward is that next week we deal with the few issues we deferred from tonight. I will prepare and circulate a draft warrant message probably this weekend ahead of our meeting on Tuesday for everybody's review. And obviously it's just going to be relatively straightforward for this. It's so the plan for next week will be button up what we didn't do tonight, approve the warrant message. And then after next Tuesday, I'll work with Travis to get our recommendations put in the report and get the report published by that Friday. And then we'll be good to go for December 5th. Now, the only thing I wanted to, we don't have to discuss because we've gone for a while tonight, but just some other thing that will come up next week is think about which of these articles we would consider for a consent agenda, because that will probably be input the select board will be looking for from us is which articles we'd go for a consent agenda on. As Travis mentioned, they are going through the steps to have the ability to reduce quorum. So that might be something coming our way. Obviously, with the cases spiking, it's getting a little more tenuous for the 5th. Go ahead, Travis.
Yeah, sorry, that's just one point. There was a little bit of confusion. It seemed like online that people thought the select board was talking about reducing quorum to 10 people. I think it came out of my legal notice. I had to post 7 days to allow them to discuss and vote on reducing quorum. And it says that it can go to 10%, which if you take 100 is 10, which meaning that the FinCom and the select board could hold a town meeting and, well, you guys would have 2/3 majority. So
hey, we're good with that.
But that's not the intention. So the intent is just to allow them to sort of have the discussion. I think, it had been discussed by Chief Cassidy leading into July of, if 75 was the right number. That never happened. But if we want to actually, if they want to actually take action on it, I needed to post a legal notice, and I apologize if that led to some confusion.
Yeah. So right now we're still on for the 5th, and we still want to do that if we can, even if we have to do it to reduce quorum, only because we need to take not all the actions, but a lot of the adjustments we made earlier, capital stabilization, things like that need to happen so we can set the tax rate. So, the free cash appropriations, not so much, but the other stuff will allow us to.
If we don't set the tax rate, do we get tax bills? Just wondering, asking for a friend.
For double.
Oh, okay.
That's right. There's you have to pay interest. No, just kidding. If we don't set the tax rate, we cannot send out the third quarter bills. But so there's a cash flow issue there, right? But also it doesn't mean that the taxes go away or whatever. You just end up having to pay them sooner and get you still, it ends up, it's kind of like the deferral that occurred earlier this year, right? You push it off by a month, but that means your next bill is due 2 months sooner.
You're answering too much. So that was just,
okay.
Yep.
All right,
Well, I just want to make clear that nobody thinks that is a strategy for avoiding paying their taxes, is to avoid setting the tax rate. What is it? It's one of the two certainties in life, right? So,
you ready for the motion?
Just 1 second, Chief Cassidy, could I just ask you to stay on after? I have a COVID question I wanted to ask you, but not Finance Committee related.
Sure.
Thank you.
Can I just say?
yes, go ahead. Just don't make the motion because Tim wants to say something. Good.
That last week I was at the Board of Health meeting, and it was discussed that one of the patterns in I'm going to say this wrong, but one of the patterns that they're finding is transmission from neighbor to neighbor, as opposed to like large communities like apartment buildings, but single family homes in neighborhoods, clusters.
So in other words, wear a mask when you're
So,
talking to your neighbors.
Just remember. Right, and you drive down the street and you see people talking to their neighbors and they're not wearing masks. They're walking their dogs and stopping and talking to their neighbors. So,
So now they can be fined, according to Governor Baker, $300.
Right. Mr. Maxwell, you wanted to say something?
Just to share with my fellow members of the Finance Committee, this Thursday, Capital Subcommittee will be working on our draft of the capital report. As a subcommittee for the Finance Committee, I was planning on, after we get some finalized wording on that, to bring it before us so that we can take a look at it, decide if we want to adjust it at all before we bring it to town meeting. So that was the plan. If you have any thoughts about that, concerns, please let me know, and I'm happy to adjust based on that feedback. Thanks, Ken.
Okay. Anybody else have any closing comments? Okay. If not, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. That is not subject to debate. So we'll proceed to a vote. Mr. Alfred,
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Zemer,
yes.
Mr. Maxwell,
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian,
Yes.
and I vote yes. That concludes the Tuesday, November 10th meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. As you just heard, we'll be meeting again next Tuesday to finish up our work for the special town meeting. But for tonight, we're done. So thank you and good night, and wear your mask and stay safe, everyone.